2015 meeting of the school committee will come to order. As is our tradition, please join me in pledging allegiance to our flag and our country.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to open by offering our thanks to the members of the Milton Police Department and our own Milton Public School staff for the critical roles that they played in an incident that occurred last week where an individual that was unauthorized to enter the building tried to do so. And I am pleased to say that all of the training that we engaged in worked perfectly. Our staff, our principals, our principal, our vice principals, and even the front office staff, as well as a number of other people, performed admirably. So thank you to the superintendent and our entire team. Just a few changes on the agenda. We are striking the June 11th minutes, still working on those. I am moving the full-day kindergarten grant update under the superintendent's report. I'd like the superintendent to talk about that directly under her report. And we are removing the second reading of the domestic violence leave policy. We're still gathering more information on that. With those changes, let's move ahead. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Walker. Could we possibly take a moment of silence? I meant to speak to you about this before the meeting, and I forgot. For Stephen Wilkie, who passed away.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Steve Wilkie was someone that was close to any of us who have been associated in any way with Milton hockey. He's been a fixture for decades, really, and was a real inspiration to all of us, and he passed away recently. So thank you, Ms. Sheridan. If you would, just a moment of silence for Steve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maura, do we have anyone for citizen speak? Our own Frank Scroth. Hi, Frank.
Hi.
Everybody. It's election season, my favorite time of year, and I just wanted to announce that I again will be hosting a candidates forum in partnership with the Milton High School debate team. At this point, I really just show up, and these students are researching issues. They will moderate, and they will ask questions of all the candidates. I believe this is going to be the only forum in which all three of the school committee candidates are going to be present. So I want to be clear that the public is warmly encouraged to attend. It'll be a great opportunity to hear what they think and why they feel they're best suited to represent the schools, Board of Selectmen. Are you running for Board of Selectmen, Matt? No. Well, I expect April Fool, but someday. And I'm serious. It'll be at Fuller Village at 1 o'clock on Saturday, April 11th. So again, you're all invited, and hope to see you then. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. Am I forgetting?
The date and the time again?
April 11th,
It's what time?
1 o'clock, Fuller Village, 1372 Brush Hill Road. And lastly, I want to just say a personal thank you to Ms. Sheridan and Ms. Kelly for all their years of service to the town and to the children of this town.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Frank.
Mr. Walker,
Yep.
she wants wellness off.
Say it again.
She wants wellness off the agenda.
Okay. And a late-breaking change to the agenda, health and wellness, we're striking. Okay, superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. If I might, Dr. Karen Claus, first, very important on the agenda, we have Milton High School art students here. We wait all year, we'll start tomorrow, waiting for next year's students, and I would ask Ms. Karen Hughes, Milton High School art teacher, and the Milton High School students who are able to join us here tonight to bring their pieces, their award-winning art pieces. So while we're waiting for Ms. Hughes and the students and to hear about the competition, we always wait, their artwork has been in display in Boston. We wait till the artwork returns. So this is a highlight night in the entire school year. So students and Ms. Hughes, I'll turn it over to you for introductions
Hi, Ms.
and
Hughes.
welcome.
Sit over here.
Thank you for having us. I'm tap dancing because a number of my students had a half day today and are at home. Some are feeling ill, but I think they knew they were not going to be here because they left us with their self-portraits. So at least we can acknowledge that. But I will acknowledge all the hard work and explain a little bit about what we do here every year because it's really important. So being an art teacher in high school, we have numerous competitions, and the biggest competition for the state is the Boston Globe Scholastics Art Award. And each of the art teachers, myself and Miss Allo, are given 20 nominations. So with 20 nominations, I have to choose out of all my students which 20 pieces I will submit, and then Miss Allo chooses as well. And I'm also given the chance to submit portfolios that are senior works. I can submit as many portfolios as I want, and I usually submit about 20. And those are pieces where students can submit up to 8 pieces of work. It has to be 8, and they have to write an artist statement and a thesis. So it's a written reflection about their works. This is so important. So the winners are chosen out of that in Massachusetts, and that's where we get to see not only what we're doing in our classroom, but what all the other schools in Massachusetts are doing in theirs as well, and our students get to see what they're doing and how they stack up. Does it matter if we win or lose? Not really. The fact that we're able to compete and bring these kids to the level where they get to take their work in the classroom outside of the classroom into the state and to see what other students are doing throughout the state is probably the best experience for them to have. Because with that, they will go on. They're not going to be in our classrooms their whole lives. They will go on to other classrooms, and life will take them where their jobs become their classrooms. And maybe they'll come back and visit. But for the most part, the experience to have is so huge. So that's where we're at with the 20 pieces, 40 altogether, 20 portfolios, and let me announce the winners. So we have Maya Adley here. She received an honorable mention for her painting, which isn't with us, but Maya came, so that's most important. Maria Dambrook, who received an honorable mention for her painting, which is
Is it that one right there?
right there. Maria tends to make pieces that are much larger than life, and her, so transporting them has been an issue. I'll get back to Maria in a moment, in a little bit. We have Annie Gayton, who's not here, but who also received an honorable mention for her drawing and self-portrait. Maddie Hoy, who received an honorable mention for her painting that is here, and it is a self-portrait in monochromatic tones, and it's a likeness of Maddie, so if you know her, you can say hello to her painting. Come in. This is why I tap dance. We have Josh Carey, who just walked in, who received a gold key for his drawing of himself, several selves. And also Josh received an honorable mention for another painting. Emma Predsosa received a silver key for her drawing self-portrait. She's not here, but her drawing speaks for itself. And Mr. Michael Wyatt, who is flagged by these two beautiful young ladies, and he received a gold key for his drawing. Now, Michael is very important, because Michael's drawing, because it received a gold key, all gold keys are then taken to the next level, which is the New York competition. And in New York, all the work is brought together from across the nation, every single gold key winner, from every single state. So Michael's gold key and Josh's gold key went head-to-head with the nation's gold keys. And Michael's gold key won.
Wow.
So his drawing won a gold key. And we were just talking with I was just talking with his parents, and I said, aren't you excited? You're going to Carnegie Hall in June for the weekend. I think it's 2 days. And his medal will be received on the stage at Carnegie Hall. He'll get to meet all the other I know they're going to want a chance to speak to you all, so I'll quickly go. Okay, so along with the gold keys, alongside the scholastics, are also 2 separate nominations, which are for juniors that I nominated specifically for Art All-State, which is a conference in UMass Dartmouth for the weekend for students, and they're handpicked, hand-selected through an interview process and through the applications for the 2 candidates were written. I think they wrote at least 5 pages on the computer. What I could tell, they were copying and pasting everything. And then they have to have reference letters. So 2 nominations, and Maria Danbrook and Josh Carey received my nominations as juniors to go to Art All-State. They both were granted interviews, which has never happened. We usually get to the point where they're nominated, and then they thank us for the nominations. So they were both granted interviews, and we're waiting to hear, with bated breath, whether they will receive a weekend away to be with other students across the state. And that's a huge, huge award. So we are waiting on that. The next order of business, speaking of Josh Carey and Maria Danbrook, I'm going to pat them all on the back. Maria just received the Anthony Quinn Foundation Scholarship. Do you mind if I tell them for how much? $2,550 towards a pre-college preparatory program at Rhode Island School of Design and the Arts for 8 weeks this summer. 6 weeks this summer. And this was done through reference letters and a portfolio and her own gumption. And Josh Carey as well was just told, I called and I asked the woman on the phone, and I hope she doesn't watch Milton Cable, but she told me that she's not supposed to tell me these things on the phone, but that Josh Carey from the School and Museum of Fine Arts was granted a considerable amount of money, that was quote, considerable amount of money from their summer pre-college program at the School Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. So I guess the moral is, it's just nice to see their work and the pride that they take and all of their talent go beyond these walls, and that they're able to gain so many valuable experiences, just from having arts in Milton, but also being able to enjoy art in the community and then continue to enjoy art throughout the state and possibly the world. So that's my spiel. And I apologize for some of them not being here. It really is difficult on a half day to remember some things. I know it's hard for them.
Ms. Bagley-Jones?
Of course, I have to say something, right? First of all, I think I saw some of your work hanging up somewhere.
Oh, yeah,
Milton
that's
Art
something a
Center.
little bit,
Yeah,
yeah.
just thought I'd mention that. But I'm so impressed with all of you, and art is such an important part of your lives, I'm sure. But I'm just curious, when did you really start getting into art? How young?
Each of them answer?
Karen, you can pass the mic now.
Oh,
You can just shout it out if you
You can
want.
take it out of the stand.
When did you start getting interested in art?
I'm an artist, not a tech person. Here you go.
Okay. I'm Mairead. Hi. I have been doing art for most of my life. Both of my parents are pretty artistic, so it's always been a big influence on me. Yeah.
Great.
Where do you do art outside of
I take a lot of classes at Mass Art. I'm dual enrolled there right now. what else do I do?
And what about the summertime when your mom's
All right. I help out at the Milton Art Center a lot too.
That's great.
Well, art has always been a part of my life. I've been, doodling and drawing ever since I was a kid. And then at the end of elementary school and throughout middle school, I was in the ACE program at school, and that was definitely good to be doing art along with other really artistic and really talented people. And I've just continued it into high school.
Wonderful.
Not dual enrolled in any art college.
Also, I was in the ACE program in 5th grade, and I think that really, that jumped me into, interest of art and painting and stuff, and it just relaxes me, and it's fun, so yeah. Also, not any extra art things going on.
Like the rest of them, I've been drawing since as long as I can remember, so art has always been a big part of my life.
Great. Thank you. That's what I thought you would say, but I just wanted to hear it. Thank you.
And they're all very excited to go to the Passport to the Arts next week, which is happening.
You can take that off the happenings. Do you want to share that?
I don't know all the dates, but I know all week. The notion is that we want to have students and children of Milton, as well as their families, come to all the schools and enjoy the arts. So we're featuring 1 or 2 schools per night, every night next week, and the students, even our high school students, will get passports, and they get stamped at the door or in the lobbies where the artwork will be hung, and it's just really fun to kind of go around and see what all the other schools are doing and all the levels are doing, because it really comes from kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade. I don't have to tell you, I'm preaching to the choir, but it really starts in the beginning, because none of these kids could have done this without the education that they had in the elementary schools.
Ms. Padera?
I'm just really wondering if you're going to have all these things on display, because I heard about half of what you said, but I was just staring at the art. I mean, I'm just really fascinated by it. So are these works going to be on display and the others that you've mentioned?
All the works for the Scholastics will be on display. Michael's is the only piece that is in New York City right now, so his piece cannot be on display.
Under guard, and you probably have a guard for that.
It's tight security. But we have digital photographs of his work so that we can place on display, and it will be downstairs in the lobby.
That's
Yes.
great. I can't wait.
Great.
So humility is a virtue, but I think you were a little bit too humble about the moral of this story. The moral is that we have some extraordinarily talented students, and you have nurtured and inspired that talent, and we are competing statewide and nationally. And I'd say that's a pretty big story. So we're proud of them, and we're proud of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I beaming? That's good. Thank you again for giving us the opportunity to come here. It really is a big night, and I apologize for some of us not being here, but I will get to them tomorrow.
So, before you leave, on behalf of the system, we're so proud, and Chairman Walker's right. Ms. Hughes emails every morning the updates on art and art awards, and for the viewing public with this presentation, we'll have on the front of the webpage, but this Passport to the Arts, if you think you enjoyed tonight, then you will enjoy
Just
every
wait.
night next week in a different Milton Public School. We'll put it on the web, and we have it down for later during happenings, and to be able to see from kindergarten to grade 12 the artwork.
And music concerts are connected to it. We have a cabaret the same night as the high school, so if you come to the high school on Thursday night from 5:30 to 7, you can enjoy the artwork and then go right into the cabaret, which is talented students performing, and you'll probably see some of these guys as well on stage.
Thank you, we're very
Sure.
proud.
Could we, as you leave, could we just give a shout out to all the art teachers from elementary school up, because they all had a role to play in
Absolutely.
the final products that we see here tonight. So thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
Nice job. Thank you very much. Next, we'd like to invite our internal assessment team to join us at the table.
Do you want to introduce Ms. Booth?
I do. So while you're getting settled, before we begin, In our advancement budget, a very brief introduction, going into the third year of our advancement budget, again, framing the advancement budget in the school committee asked if you were going to advance the system based on student data, what are the initiatives? I tell the story in this very room. These individuals can testify to everything from the arts, but based on the student data, we identified early literacy, closing identified achievement gaps, and science education. And again, using the student data, this school committee going to the warrant committee, going to a unanimous vote at town meeting over 2 years, have funded the text, materials and supplies, the extended day experiences, the professional development, and as a team, they could probably do this presentation equal to what I'm sharing with the public. One of the positions necessary, and that was a source, as I said to people, these individuals and the individuals at this table would have to stop what they were doing or work weekends for these data presentations. And so a data specialist was included in the advancement budget, and I'm here to tell you, and these individuals were on the team, we interviewed, we posted April, May. We interviewed May, June, July, August, through the fall. We interviewed several individuals. It's a very unique position, and I'm very, very proud to introduce to the public tonight. She has become an integral part of the Milton Public Schools in less than 2 months, Ms. Vu. And V has really gone to every school, every classroom. She came up with Ms. Sheehan, Assistant Superintendent Sheehan, short and long-term plans after meeting with all of these individuals. And we want to welcome you on behalf of the Milton Public Schools. You are a huge success already. The feedback from administrators and the position is going to help us drive instruction, and which will ultimately drive student achievement. So on behalf of the Milton Public Schools, V.
Thank you, Mary, for that generous introduction. And I'd like to say hello to the school committee here as well. So as Mary mentioned, my name is Vivu, and I just started with Milton Public School actually a month ago to the date. And in these past few weeks, I've been able to meet with the leaders of our different schools, our curriculum coordinators, our departments head, to try to get a sense of what's going on here in the school system in terms of data that people are collecting and using in the classroom. And I'm really excited to come before you tonight and give this presentation along with my colleagues here to kind of give you and the viewing public a general overview of what is happening in terms of internal assessments inside the Milton Public Schools and what we have plans for going forward. So without further ado, I'd just like to start the presentation. If there are any questions along the way, please feel free to stop me.
I do have one other thing, and I promise I won't say anything until you're done. I said, I want to frame this tonight, that the administrators said to me, we'll have to get into a pattern of when we're sharing this, and I want to recognize Member Mary Kelly. As I shared with the individuals on staff, Ms. Kelly was asking about internal assessments before the Department of Education was talking about district-determined measures. And so through this advancement budget, we were able to provide the staff the time to develop these internal assessments, use some of the funds at different levels to purchase the internal assessments we need. So this is very significant that Ms. Kelly asked for this presentation. And V, I think it gave you a great opportunity to learn the system inside out in a very short time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you want to introduce your co-presenters?
Absolutely. So to my left here is Amy Gale, and Amy is the curriculum coordinator for both the Cunningham and Collycott Elementary School. So she's here to speak on behalf of the elementary school. And then you all know Dr. Spalding. She's the head of Pierce Middle School here in Milton Public Schools. And then we have Michelle Cruiser, who is one of our assistant principals here at the high school. So they'll all help me with this presentation today. All right, so get started. Make sure this works. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of assessments and some of the terms that we use to make sure that we're all on the same page. Because I think when we're talking about assessment and data, sometimes it is a very loaded term in the education context. A lot of people, feel this way and that way about data and testing and assessment. So I just want to make sure that we're all speaking the same language when we're talking about assessment here in Milton Public School. Now I'll go through kind of a general overview of all the assessments that we're currently doing at the different school level, elementary, middle, and high. Then my colleagues here will kind of report on progress that they've made since last summer when they gave this presentation to the school committee. And then I'll talk about district next steps and what we'll be doing. So to talk about assessment, I think there are several categories of assessment, and I'm just going to talk about these two very quickly, a diagnostic assessment and summative assessment. So these are the really straightforward, easy to understand type of assessments. So a diagnostic is usually a pre-test that a teacher gives at the beginning of a class, a course, the beginning of the year, and it's really best used by teachers and coordinators to identify gaps in skills and knowledge so that they know how to prepare the instruction for the rest of the year. And then we have summative assessment, and you all know quite a bit about this. This is an evaluation of student learning given at the end of an instructional unit or at the end of the year against a standard or a benchmark. So it's best used to provide achievement and or growth data at the end of a course or end of the year. So some examples are end of unit assessments, final exams, and of course the infamous MCAS or PARC that we're actually switching. We're in the process of doing PARC now. So PARC is the summative assessments that our district is doing. So we have assessment at the beginning of the year, that's diagnostic, end of the year, summative. What do we do in between? How do we know that teachers are teaching and students are learning what they're supposed to be teaching, what they're supposed to be learning? So formative assessment really helps to monitor student learning by providing ongoing feedback that can be used by teachers and students to improve learning and teaching. And it's best used by teachers and coordinators as tools to plan for instruction and collaboration. So the idea of a formative assessment is really, you give it out as a check to make sure that students are learning what you're teaching in the classroom. And it is an iterative process whereby, you find out that the percentage of your students are not learning something, then you can quickly adjust your instruction to make sure that you meet that need. And it's formative and it's iterative. The data is not always pretty. It's in fact, very, sometimes very messy, but that is the process. That's the iterative process that allows you to kind of identify what the gaps are of instruction during the course of a year. So some formative assessment may include terms like common assessments in the classroom, essays, tests, quizzes, projects, performance-based tasks. These are all examples of formative assessments. Then we have benchmark, interim, and internal assessments. These are also terms that are commonly associated with formative assessments. And so I mentioned that it occurs during the course of instruction, during the course of the year. And it's not necessarily comparable one unit to the next. It really depends on the purpose of the assessment. So when you're talking about formative assessment, you really need to talk about the whole context of how it's being used in the classroom to really understand how to interpret the results. And Milton Public School uses a combination of all these approaches to really evaluate teaching and learning here. So I'll go through all that. So what can assessment tell us? And I'll talk about 3 types of measure here. So growth is a measure of academic progress made from one point to another point in the, at some point in the year. So the important thing to really remember about a growth measure is that you have to make sure that it's measuring the same thing from the beginning of the year to the end of the year so that you can really compare the data and say that there's been growth. So for example, if you're measuring fluency data at the beginning of the year, but at the end of the year, you're measuring your students have moved on to comprehension, and you're getting data about comprehension, then you're really comparing apples and oranges. So for growth data to really work, you have to make sure that you're measuring the same thing at the first point and at the second point. The other type of measure is performance. This is pretty straightforward. It's basically mastery of concepts or skills that were taught in the class during that particular unit. And then the third type of measure is predictive. And this kind of measure supposedly predict how a student will do on a standardized exam such as the MCAS or the PARCC. So predictive measures are really hard to do, and most internally developed assessment will not have a predictive component to it. You know, this is where the big testing company make their money in designing tests that supposedly will tell you if your students will pass the MCAS or will pass this, the PARCC. But this is not something that a district level assessment will be able to do. So I did want to mention that because a lot of people have the idea that, you know, if you do this assessment, then it's going to let you know that students are on grade level, that they'll pass the PARCC or the MCAS, and that's not necessarily the case. It's very hard to get this measure to work right. So I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about in terms of growth and performance. So let's look at this example of F&P reading level, which is an assessment that we do use here in Milton Public School. So this is giving you the reading level for Susie and Johnny in the fall and the spring. And so in the fall, Susie was at an I, and in the spring, she was at an M. Johnny was at an L in the fall, and in the spring, he was at an N. So when you're counting the levels, you see that from I to M, Susie made 4 levels of growth. But from L to N, Johnny only made 2 levels of growth. So N is grade level for the spring term. And you can see in this example that although Susie actually achieved more growth than Johnny did, she's still slightly below grade level. So it's, I bring this example to you and to the folks watching at home because I think it's really important for you to distinguish what exactly you're looking for when you're using a formative assessment in the classroom. So it's really just important to match up the purpose of an assessment with the interpretation of the results. So if you're looking at, you know, just the achievement data for this, you might say that, oh, Susie is still below grade level, but considering that she started way below where Johnny did, she made tremendous gains, and we have to recognize students for making progress in the classroom too, and the teachers for helping them make that progress. So what about district determined measures, or DDM? This is a term that is used more frequently, I guess, more recently, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about what it is because we do have to acknowledge it. So it is part of the new educator evaluation system where every teacher will need to measure and report on student growth based on 2 assessments referred to as district determined measures to show that impact on student learning. So this is a requirement coming down from the state that every district will have to comply with. So one DDM may be the student growth percentile, the SGP obtained from the MCAS or the PARCC or another growth measure. And another DDM may include portfolios, commercial assessment, district developed assessment, or capstone projects. So these are all examples of what could potentially become a DDM. So in Milton Public School, a DDM working group has been convened to identify among the existing assessments whether they can be used for each grade level or each content area, or whether there needs to be new assessment developed for each grade level and content area. And although some internal assessments today, presented today, could be DDMs. Milton Public School primary objective in using internal assessment is really to assess teaching and learning. Okay, so this is really the culmination of my, my research in the past couple of weeks of meeting with all the leadership in the district, talking with all the curriculum coordinators, and trying to really parse out what teachers are doing at each grade level, what kind of assessments are being used. So in grade 1, we have the Fountas and Pinnell, which is an assessment that measures reading ability in ELA. And you can see that the FMP is carried through in grade 2. In grade 3, we start having the Scholastic Reading Inventory, another reading assessment which provides data on student reading comprehension and growth over time. And in grade 4 and 5, they basically follow through with giving the SRI and the FMP again. So what you can see here is there are common assessments that are vertically aligned from grade level to grade level, which gives us really a great opportunity to really look at the data and see how it changes from grade 1 to grade 2, grade 3, so that you can kind of plan for the following year what to do about instruction. In French, we have some common assessment called the GB Plus at the end of the year, which is aligned with the Fountas and Pinnell. And then in grade 2, they do the GB Plus throughout the year. In grade 1, they only do it at the very end of the year. And the reason is, our first grader are being immersed in a new language. They're really just trying to figure out basic vocabulary, so they don't have the reading comprehension level yet to be tested on the standardized assessment. But teachers have developed kind of their own assessment to use with students to help with how do you identify whether a student is decoding correctly or comprehending terms correctly. So we have that for the French language program. And then we have pre-tests, and the French programs are also piloting post-tests. And then in math, we have pre-test, mid-years, and finals, and also end-of-unit common assessments for each of the units that they're doing. In science, science is implementing a new curriculum called FOSS this year, and our science coordinator has made a really great stride in just bringing the curriculum into the classroom and making sure that every teacher has a chance to work with this new curriculum. She's now developing common unit assessment essentially for this curriculum, which will be implemented next year. So this is happening all at the elementary school level. In the middle school, you see that we have the SRI, the Scholastic Reading Inventory, and the FMP, the Fountas and Pinnell, are carried over from 6th through 8th grade. The middle school is also piloting a new assessment this year called Academic Merit, which is essentially a closed reading and writing assessment that is aligned to the Common Core. So they're really excited about that. I think they have plans on continuing with this assessment in the following year. And even the high school has tested out this academic merit assessment, and they really like it, and they want to continue doing that next year as well. In history and geography, the middle school is piloting these DBQs, document-based questions, as a type of assessment to obtain a growth measure. So they're doing this assessment at the beginning of the year and then toward the end of the year. And it's asking students to use primary and secondary sources to respond to pre-AP document-based question. And this is going to be a growth measure for the school as well. In math, they have end-of-unit common assessments, and they are also piloting a performance-based measure drawing on the MARS performance-based task. MARS is Mathematic Assessment resource service. And this performance-based task is, instead of doing a straightforward math problem using equation and whatnot, they're being asked to do a task to apply all their critical thinking skills. So this assessment is really about critical thinking skill. Can you apply the strategies that you're learning in your various math classes to this problem? And so it's definitely a higher order assessment. It's not just multiple choice, pick this, pick that, but it's really asking students to think and apply their knowledge. And then they're going to do this again at the end of the year to measure whether students have made growth. So we're excited to see the results of that. In science, they have a pre-test and a post-test in all the sciences, in earth, physical, and life sciences. And they are piloting claims, evidence, and reasoning tasks, very similar to the idea of the math test, where students are being asked to use critical thinking skills to solve a science problem or a science task. And in the high school, in the humanities, they're also doing a pre-test and post-test using an essay writing prompt. So they've done the pre-test already, and we're collecting the data for that. And they're going to do a post-test at the end of the year to measure whether students' writing skills have improved. They also do a common mid-year and a final. And like I mentioned earlier, they are also piloting the academic merit assessment. And in math, they have common unit assessments in courses 1 and 2. And they're doing the collaborative critical thinking task. So again, growing from what the middle schools are working on in terms of really using critical thinking skills. The high school is also picking up that piece of it and really incorporating these tasks into their assessment in the classroom. They're also giving a common mid-year and final. And science, common unit assessments in biology, chemistry, and physics, and common mid-year and final. So I mentioned that math have common unit assessment in courses 1 and 3, and they're really working hard this summer to develop some common unit assessment for courses 3 as well, so that next year we will have the whole spectrum, course 1, 2, and 3 with common assessments. And the high school curriculum, the high school science curriculum rather, is undergoing some revision in chemistry and physics, so they'll be revisiting their assessments as well, and they will be modified. So that is really, a lot of the information that I was able to learn and extract from talking to everybody in the district so far. And now my colleagues are going to give you some updates on what they've been up to since last summer.
Thank you, Vi. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to know Ms. Vu as she has joined our team here in the Milton Public Schools. And I vowed when she was hired that I was going to make her my best friend. And I think she's well on her way to becoming my best friend. I am Amy Gale. I'm the curriculum coordinator for Cunningham and Collycott. However, I work very closely with the curriculum coordinators at Tucker and Glover so that we can assure curriculum and assessment alignment across the district. That's really been the focus of our work for the last 2 years. And we're really excited by what's been happening over the last couple of years and growing not only our curriculum, but also our ability to internally assess our students and analyze that data. So I'm going to update you on what's been happening since July. One of the things that's really happened since July is that we've begun to change the conversation in assessment. No longer do we talk just about, oh wait, we're on the wrong slide, sorry. Okay. That's us, right? No longer are we talking simply about achievement. We are now talking about growth as well. And as Ms. Vu indicated in the beginning of the presentation, it really is a validating measure, especially for those students who might not quite yet be at benchmark, but who have made tremendous growth. And we really want to make sure that we are validating the progress of those students and also the exceptional teaching that's happening in the classroom. And I think by changing the conversation to growth, we're really better able to do that.
So that's been great. We have been working with our grade level facilitators. These are teacher leaders from each building at each grade level to really talk about how we can measure growth within our Fountas and Pinnell assessment and also within our scholastic reading inventory. They have worked with the curriculum coordinators to develop growth bands that will help to measure growth for each and every student. This is a challenging process. As some of you know, assessments, sometimes children get hundreds on assessments, and if they get 100, how do we measure their growth? And this has really sparked some wonderful conversation between ourselves and also with ourselves and the grade level facilitators, who then bring it back to their teams. We are looking forward to also working with the teams of teachers in schools to analyze the PARCC data when it comes in. We will be getting student growth percentiles from the PARCC data this year. They will be able to link it to the MCAS data from last year. So that, again, I think will be a very validating measure for us to look at. And we also want to look at that data in terms of the item analysis so that we will be able to inform our Common Core instruction moving forward. In terms of, am I on math performance tasks? Yes, math performance tasks. One of the things that we've done this year, and Dr. Leif Lagueros and Dr. Karen Spalding have turned us on to the Mars assessment tasks. That's something that we as a team have worked to review. We're not implementing them as of yet. We're reviewing them. We also are reviewing the everyday math common assessment tasks, which they have a new version coming out of those next year, and those are called EM4. So we've been looking at those as well. And we have been working with our grade level facilitators to ensure that we can measure growth with the assessments that we have in place, our pre-test, our mid-year, and our final. And that, again, is information that we train the grade level facilitators with a data-driven protocol, and then they bring that back to their teams. Another one of the exciting initiatives that's been taking place at the elementary level this year has been the use of TS Gold in all of our preschool and kindergarten classrooms. TS Gold is interesting as it is aligned with the Common Core, but also measures the social emotional growth of children, the cognitive growth of children, and again, the academic growth of children. And they found that this is a nice predictor of future success in school. And as a parent of a kindergarten child, it's been very useful for me to see that information coming home, which is fantastic. Technology has played a huge role in what we have done in assessment this year. Thanks to the MFE, we were able to purchase iPads and conduct training for over 50 teachers in terms of using an iPad app to administer the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment system, and that's been tremendously successful. All of the teachers in TS Gold are using iPads as well to document growth with their children and upload evidence of the growth of those children so the teachers can share with the parents at conferences actual pictures of their children engaging with the curriculum, which has been fantastic. The French program has purchased the GB Plus software, so while it's not an online app like we have for the Fountas and Pinnell, it is a way for the data to be housed and also for them to be able to share it more effectively with their colleagues. And today, we actually had a wonderful half-day professional development day on using Google Apps for Education to also share the data that we collect from teachers and also sharing documents and resources with children in the classroom. So we've done about 10 years of growth in the last 6 months when it comes to technology. Finally, last but not least, science. This year, we have implemented the FOSS units of study. These have been a fantastic addition to the science curriculum at the elementary level. Children are doing science every day as opposed to reading about science or listening to science. The FOSS units of study have been translated into French, which has been, again, wonderful for our students in the French program to be able to participate. And they have worked under the guidance of Science Curriculum Coordinator Bernadette Moonen to create common assessments that will be implemented for the next school year. So, next steps. As I stated earlier, we are going into the third year of our common district assessments, and at this point, our eye is really on refining our protocols and procedures around internal assessment. We would like to review the assessment analysis procedures based on the information that we have collected over the last 2 years. We would like to utilize the writing portion of the Fountas and Pinnell, which we have not done yet. This is something that happens after you have done the running record, which is the reading portion of the assessment. And we really find that for measuring growth, that the writing piece is a really validating measure. We also, within the same vein, want to create writing performance tasks for the children in grades 4 and 5, for whom we don't do the Fountas and Pinnell for each one of them. And that's something that we're really looking forward to doing, especially as we have our eye on improving the writing instructional practices at the elementary level. We also want to make sure that we continue to create common assessments, both in French language and Spanish. Moving to the math, we have looked at growth from our pretest to our mid-year already, but we're now looking at growth from the perspective of the mid-year to the final exam. And that's something, again, we've been doing with our grade level facilitators using the data-driven protocol. And we also want to continue to review the tasks, the MARS tasks, as well as the EM4 tasks, to see if those are something that may help us more effectively measure growth. In terms of the science, as I said before, we're really looking to further develop and implement common assessments, both in French and English, for grades 3 to 5. So it's been a busy couple of years. It's been a very busy last 6 months, and we met as coordinators yesterday, actually, and really started planning for the work that we're going to be doing with teachers over the summer and into next year. So I feel like we're at a very exciting place for the Milton Public Schools right now. And I will pass it along to Karen Spalding. I'll click for you, because I did such a good job.
So I think the statement that I made to Superintendent Gormley after meeting or spending a half an hour with V was, she's a keeper. Because she does really understand assessment and data, and it's exciting to have her on the team. So I'll give you a brief update on where the Pierce Middle School has been since, or what we've been doing rather, since July. The first thing that we were hoping to do was to compare the targeted reading support student F&P data with the English Language Arts results. And we had some very promising, I put 2 of those findings from the presentation that we did in October, 2 of those findings from what we saw in terms of growth for students who are receiving the reading support. And just to clarify, in terms of the reading assessments that we do at the Pierce Middle School, we do the Scholastic Reading Inventory for all students, and then for students who are notably below grade level, we follow up with the Fountas and Pinnell to give us more information and guide the targeted reading support for them. We wanted to expand the Scholastic Reading Inventory to 8th grade. We did that for this year, so all students in grades 6, 7, and 8 had the SRI administered to them in the fall and will again in the spring. We look to implement the mathematics assessment resource performance tasks to collect growth data for this school year, and those come out of the Silicon Valley Math Initiative. And there are national data sets that we can compare our students to give us information, and they are complex, rigorous, multi-layered math performance-based tasks. So for example, students might receive an image of a family, an extended family, and then they receive a graph plot with names, with just names and dots and no labeled axes. And they have to, based on just that initial information, match up the images to what they see on the graph. And then they take it one step further and they create a mathematical model. So they might create an equation based on the data that they've now constructed just from the photo and what they have in the graph. And then they have to explain their mathematical reasoning around that, around their decisions and thoughts on that problem. So when we, once we administer the MARS in the spring and then we get our PARC results back, we are hoping to be able to look at whether or not there's any predictive value which is messy work, but we want to look to see if there's any connection between how students do on these MARS tasks and how they perform on PARC. We also had the goal of completing the common assessments in science, and we do have one common assessment per trimester per grade level, so that's in the earth, life, and physical sciences. And we did implement or administer a pretest at the beginning of the year in all 3 of those disciplines so that we could look at how students had gained understanding over the course of the year. And then finally, we wanted to continue the work on the claims, evidence, and reasoning. And we have draft performance-based tasks for those, and the rubrics, we're working on the rubrics, developing those. And hopefully what you saw across all of the columns for the internal assessments at the Pierce, which is also true for the elementary, is there's really this theme of moving beyond a simple give me 2 + 2 = whatever that might be, 4, and really moving into these more complex problems for students, whether it's in English language arts, where they're really being asked to think critically about a piece of text, or if it's in history and geography, where they're interacting with primary and secondary sources and using evidence from those, whether it's in mathematics, where they're applying mathematical thinking, or whether it's in science, where they're building their, or justifying their claims with evidence and explaining their reasoning, just as they do in math, just as they do in history and geography, and just as they do in English language arts. So our next steps are to collect that final SRI data in May 2015. We're going to squeeze it between our PARC work that we've been doing lately. Collect final F&P data for those receiving the targeted reading support and look at their growth. And then we want to determine whether or not, right now we're piloting academic merit in the 7th grade. Teachers also participated in professional development related to that. And the academic merit, again, is a close reading. Students engage in close reading, which is not what I'm doing with my glasses and the piece of paper, but rather a very thoughtful, analytical reading of a text where students look for details and patterns for really deep and precise understanding of the text. And so there will be conversations around whether or not to expand that to grades 6, 7, and 8, to 6 and 8, piloted in 7th grade. We'll continue the development of the document-based questions, and again, so document-based question exercises are what appear on advanced placement tests for in the area of history, and so we do what are called mini-Qs, which are sort of smaller versions of that, where they're really complex questions, where students have to dig into primary and secondary sources, again, explaining their thinking and rooting it in the evidence. So we'll continue the development of that. In mathematics, again, we'll implement the second round of the performance-based assessments. The other thing not captured in this PowerPoint that the mathematics department has also been doing is what we call rule of 4 tasks. And those are where students have to, for a particular task, show 4 representations of the same idea, a graphical representation, mathematical model, that kind of thing, explain their reasoning. And so they've been working on that actually as a department. And then finally for science, to continue to develop the rubrics and also develop anchor papers, or rather identify anchor papers. So what we're trying to do across all of the subject areas is develop detailed tools so that when scoring happens, whether I score it or Amy Gale scores it or Vivu scores it, that there's really still a high bar from one person to the next. And so we're really spending a lot of time having clearly articulated rubrics for what we expect to see in work, and then identifying papers that show those criteria in the work. So we can really have consistency around scoring as we look at growth and those kinds of things.
All right, I'm going to go over some of the things that we've been doing at the high school since July 2014. Our first goal was to pilot the mathematics performance tasks in the core math courses to collect data growth, and we have done that. We are participating in collaborative critical thinking tasks for the students in all the math courses. They do 1 per term. They're open-ended performance-based tasks, kind of like the same idea that Dr. Spalding was talking about with, having students look at a problem and solving it in many different ways, and really something deeper than just, like you said, 2 + 2, what's that answer? So we are doing that, and the feedback from the math teachers is that they want to do more because they feel like the students really need that practice. So it's been positive so far, and they want to include more moving into next year. The second goal was to review and revise the format of mid-year and final exams in the math courses to mirror that of the PARCC assessment. And we have done that in our courses, not only the mid-year exam at this point, but we also have modified some of the common unit assessments. Now, for the common unit assessments, they didn't release the PARCC sample questions until late. So we had to simulate what they would look like for the common assessments. But then by the time the mid-year came out, we had the sample questions, so we were able to include some of those on our mid-year exams. And then the plan is to also reformat some sample PARCC questions for the final exam too. The next goal was to implement common unit assessments in core science classes, and that implementation is in progress. Chemistry and physics were undergoing some curriculum revisions, so they do have common unit assessments right now, but they are still revising the curriculum into next school year, so they will modify accordingly as we go on. The next goal was to review and revise the format of the mid-year and final for the science classes to align with the revised pre-AP and AP standards, and that has been done for the mid-year exam for all the for all the science courses except for biology. And the reason why biology was not modified for the new standards is that they're still testing on the old standards. So we have to keep it as close to the MCAS as possible because that's what our students are getting tested on in biology for now. When we do switch over, probably by, I think, 2018, we will modify it accordingly. And also the revision of the final exam is planned for the end of the year. For our last goal, we had implementation, review, and revision of a common rubric for the persuasive essay that was for the history classes in order to collect growth for 2014-15. So this has actually been done in not only the history class where they work on a persuasive essay, but also in the English classes where they work on an explanatory essay. They do a pre-test now, and they do a post-test. They have a common rubric that they grade on. And they used that pretest to develop different units to focus on during the school year. For example, Barbara Wright, the department head for humanities, told me, one of the weaknesses was supportive contextual evidence. So they did a mini unit on supportive contextual evidence, and they would give a small essay to write, not as big as this pretest and post-test, to evaluate how students were doing on that and how they were progressing on that. Same with, she gave another example of transition sentences between paragraphs. So they did a small unit on transition paragraphs, and then they were assigned a task to write a few paragraphs. They were assessed on that. So it's not only the pre-test and the post-test, they're using that pre-test to decide on how they can work on different areas during the school year. Our next steps. So for the humanities, they're working on collecting and analyzing data from the pre-test and the post-test in May to discern growth in ELA and history. This is our first year doing this pre-test and post-test with the common rubric, so this is something new, and we want to continue to do that. And this ties into the second piece, which is move forward with the implementation of academic merit common assessment in humanities. The high school teachers have really fallen in love with the academic merit system. One of the things that Dr. Spalding was talking about was calibration of grading. A feature of the academic merit that benefits students and teachers is they have a double blind, they call it a fine tuner for grading. This year the history teachers are all working on it, and by the end of the year they hope to all become classified as readers. What they do is they grade essays, and there's double-blind grading. So they calibrate. If one teacher is grading an essay and another teacher is grading an essay, the goal is that they grade it the same way across the board. So the English teachers some of them are working on it this year, but they're going to work on it more into next year. The history goal is to have it all completed by the end of this year, to have all their teachers as readers. And also the goal is to use academic merit to do the post-test and the pre-test using academic merit in addition. So they haven't done it this year. This year they did everything on paper, but the hope is in the future to use the academic merit system. The other benefit of academic merit is they also have a literary companion for the English teachers, where they have some pre-made tests that go along with some of the works they read, such as Animal Farm, Romeo and Juliet. So the English teachers have been using that. And then for history, they also have Assessment 21, where students can read nonfiction literature and do some quizzing on that. So they plan to use that more going into next year. For mathematics, we're really focusing on creating a system with all these common unit assessments, really getting some way to organize all the data so that they can analyze it. Because we have so much data now, we need to figure out how to organize it and really take a look at it. So that's for courses 1 and 2. Course 3, we're working on common assessments for course 3 next year because the curriculum has been changing over the last few years. And again, the last thing is collecting and analyzing results of these collaborative critical thinking tasks. We've collected data on how students are doing, but how do we organize this? How do we really use this moving forward? For science, again, collecting and analyzing data from the revised mid-year and final exams and common unit assessments too, even though it doesn't say that up there. And we have an exciting project that we're working on for next year. We want to pilot full-year laboratory portfolios that assess both skills and content knowledge in biology and chemistry. They started it this year, just for the second half of the year in chemistry. The idea is to have 2 to 3 entries per term in a portfolio. In the beginning, the tasks are more directed, but as they go along through the year, the plan is to increase inquiry. The goal is by the end of the year, the student is able to design their own lab experiment for the course. So it's a pretty wonderful task that they want to do. The hope, right now we're doing it paper and binders that way, but the hope is to eventually have it digital and have a digital portfolio. So that's an exciting idea that they're working on. Like I said, chemistry is starting it right now, and biology wants to pick it up. So we're really looking forward to the progress on that. So that's everything for the high school for now.
So I will wrap up our presentation here with the district and talking about next steps for what we're planning. So before talking about next step, I'd like to talk about some of the challenges that you have probably inferred from the presentations that my colleagues gave. So currently, a central system for collecting data does not exist. And just hearing about all the different assessments that we do at the different schools and all the different grade level, you can imagine the multiplier of that problem of not having a central system. You know, right now, Ms. Gale here and other curriculum coordinators are having to set up Google spreadsheets or Excel spreadsheets themselves and managing the data and then sending it out to teachers at the end of an assessment, gathering that data, receiving it back in the email inbox and cutting and pasting and making sure everything is lined up correctly. So as you can imagine, that is a very time-consuming task. It's not efficient. It's not efficient use of anyone's time, and that is a problem that we currently have. The other problem is no one assessment can really capture all the measures that we might be interested in looking in at the district. So an assessment might give you a really good growth measure, but it might not give you is this student mastering the standard? So how do you balance which kind of measure you want to collect data and information on? And then lastly, how much data do we collect and make sure that it's still instructionally relevant to teachers? Because really the whole point of doing formative assessment is to inform teaching and learning in the classroom. And there's a lot of great things happening, and from what you can tell from my colleague's presentation here, but if we put the burden of collecting data and thinking of a structure for managing all that data on the teachers, they're not going to get a lot of other work done. So these 3 questions are really what I'm thinking about when I'm trying to think about next steps that we can take as a district, is how to alleviate these issues. So one of my first steps is really to work with all the discipline to streamline the data collection process in all of the schools, and it really determines which measure that we want to capture at the district level, which measures are really going to help us when we look at the results to help us make policy decisions or help us to make decisions about how do we further support teachers to maximize student learning. So it's not just collecting data for data's sake, because a lot of people fall under that trap. And with data, you can really get into a rabbit hole of, you want to have more data to answer more questions, but then at some point you really have to say, okay, to what end are we collecting all this data? What end is it serving? And if it's not serving the purpose of increasing student learning, then do we really need teachers to collect that? So that's some of the major questions that I'll be working with curriculum coordinators and district leaders about. Another step that we can take is to evaluate the district data system and to determine whether the current system really works for us. So some of my colleagues refer to a district-wide training that we provided earlier today to all staff members in the district on Google Apps for Education, which is a great free resource for all of our teachers and students here in the district as well. We have access to the Google suites of product. How do we maximize that? How do we make use of that? There's Google Classroom that's available for teachers to use to help manage communication between themselves and their students and whole assignments, tests, quizzes, announcements. So all of that is really exciting, but we need to really look at all our different systems that we have going on in the district and really determine whether it meets the need of teachers in the classroom. So work with Dr. Angela Burke to train staff on relevant technology tools. So we started doing that this morning. And the feedback that I got, so I ran a session on Google Forms and Sheets, and there were about 20 teachers in my session. They came in, some of them, have varying knowledge about Google and how to use Google Classroom and Google Drive. By the end of the session, I can safely say that they were all pretty excited about what Google Classroom can do and how to use Google Forms to administer surveys and tests and quizzes to their students. So I am looking forward to follow-ups from these teachers in my session just to work with them more about how do we use these different technology in their classroom. And then, so I also want to work with curriculum coordinators to support data analysis practices at all grade level. So it's one thing to really collect and visualize the data and analyze it, but then what do you do with it? What do you do with that data once it's there in front of you? And that's something that I want to work with grade level teams on and get the supports from curriculum coordinators and school leaders to really give thoughts to that. Not only do we want to collect the data, but we want to make sure that the data is action-oriented. What can you do next? And then lastly, what I'm hoping to do is to develop dashboards for each school that hold a common set of data so that whenever you want to know something about a school, you can kind of go to this dashboard. You can pull up demographic for the school. You can tell how many ELL students, how many students with special services, and all of that really basic data about school should be available in one place somewhere for administrators to see, for teachers to look at, for families to look at if they're curious about the different schools that they have. So I'm really excited about bringing all these data resources to bear and really help push Milton Public School forward, because as you can tell from this presentation, there's a lot of great work that's been done already. The groundwork has been laid, and it's really how do we think about pushing forward and maximizing and building capacity for everybody in the district. So I'm going to stop the presentation here, and we're open to take any questions that you have.
And if I might, before the school committee asks questions, in the school committee presentation, and we also have it available tonight, again, asking when these presentations should happen. Each of the levels have submitted their data, a summary of their data in the testable subjects. So that was in your presentation that was sent to you. We also have it as an appendix to this presentation.
Ms. Sheridan.
I almost don't know where to begin. There's so many thoughts that I could say right now. I think that you have proven in 1 month that the need for this thread to be woven together, to tie all the pieces together, is so important and so critical in the work that we do in education today. And I'm just really grateful that you're here and that you bring so much to share. I want to just, as I was listening to all of this, and just so you know, I'm an educator, so I need to full disclosure. I'm trying to visualize the big picture of how all these people fit together. So I see that you as the data analyst and the principal, and then I see the curriculum coordinators who work with the teacher, the grade level facilitators, right? So is that like you, the principals and data analysts are on either side, kind of supporting the work, but it's really the curriculum coordinators that work with the grade level facilitators? Or I'm just trying to visualize. So how is this information trickled down? Because there's so much information, and I heard that the curriculum coordinators work with the grade level team facilitators who take it back and disseminate that information at a grade level. So just help me put all those pieces together, if you don't mind.
So I think it's a little bit different at every level, so I can speak to the elementary level, and then I can pass it along to my colleagues, and they can explain at the next level. At the elementary level, curriculum coordinators, principals, grade level facilitators, and classroom teachers all work together regularly through staff meetings is a way that principals can disseminate information to entire staff, which is wonderful. Our work with the grade level facilitators is something that happens monthly, where we really push out initiatives, and it was originally using a data-driven protocol to analyze math assessments. We've grown that into ELA assessments a little bit as well. And additionally, we do occasionally, and more than occasionally, are invited to grade level meetings with classroom teachers as well. So, and that could be the principal and or the curriculum coordinator. So there are sort of multiple levels at which all three people work together. At this point, having V on board, it's been really nice because the curriculum coordinators and the principals can really feed the information that we've gathered thus far to V, who can help us to sort of determine what we want to see from the data moving forward. So it's sort of happening in multiple ways at the elementary level.
If I might, before you leave the elementary teachers in Milton would tell you that they work daily with the coordinators. So these grade level facilitators are just another assistance to back up the coordinators. They meet once a month. As Ms. Gale said, they bring back initiatives, but it's not the grade level facilitators' responsibility at all. They're another backup communicator working with their peers, but the coordinators in Milton are hands-on in the classrooms doing observations, working with small groups of teachers, working collaboratively with the principals. So the coordinators in Milton take on a huge role.
So at the middle school level, we have a I would say, critical and powerful structure that supports the data work, and that is in our common planning time that's built right into the schedule. And so every other week we have department meetings, curriculum meetings that are focused on data and reflecting on data and making curriculum decisions and looking at student work and those kinds of things. So those meetings are facilitated by curriculum coordinators, and then I meet on a regular basis with the curriculum coordinators to do all of those same things as well, and then all of us working together with V.
At the high school, I feel like it's most similar to how it runs at the middle school. We have weekly common planning time. We have common planning time, and they meet weekly, I should say, for all the different departments, and they meet with the department heads who are curriculum people. And then I meet with the department heads to talk about progress and goals and how we're working towards them and how the student performance. And then we meet with Mr. Jett regarding everything that's going on for the full school.
I would also add that, at each individual school level, they're really focused on the data that impacts their particular school environment. And as the district analyst, I have a much wider view, so I can really see how, data is flowing from elementary school to middle school to high school. And I see myself as a person who kind of pull all of that together and kind of see the pattern and the trend and the thread really that goes through all these different schools as we, serve the whole K-12 spectrum.
So I just need to say, I feel like it almost takes my breath away with how far we've come in terms of looking at the curriculum, the assessment of the curriculum, aligning it to the Common Core, and the internal assessments that have been developed, and now translating it to Park, and with the addition of this position and your invaluable resource. I just couldn't be prouder of the work that you all do on a daily basis, and you support our teachers, which is so important, because that job is very challenging, and just as the job of students today is very challenging. We expect a lot of everyone, and so it's great when these supports can be put in place. Thank you so much. And I do have a question about Park, but I'll save it till later. Thank you.
Mr. Zulus?
Thank you for that presentation. I have a question really for each level, and that relates to the amount of testing. And just as best you can describe how much of our students' time is spent on testing now. Is it the right amount? And if it is, why?
Second.
That's an excellent question, and it's something that we talk about regularly. And to credit Ms. Vu in her presentation, I think to what end, that everything that we push out to classrooms, we want to ensure that there is a benefit to the students sitting in those classrooms. We have a variety of assessment periods throughout the year. Literacy assessment happens from 2 to 4 times a year. Children are usually only tested for about 20 minutes with the Fountas and Pinnell. So it's a very short one-on-one test where they're actually reading. So you're really actually not losing instructional time with the student during that. And curriculum coordinators, reading specialists, and classroom teachers work together to administer those. So it really facilitates wonderful conversation around how to move instruction forward, which is great. SRI takes approximately 60 minutes. And again, that's administered twice a year. The common unit assessments at the end of every math unit, those again are typically 45 minutes to 60 minutes, sometimes less. And those are done as a summative component at the end of each unit, but they are also formative in that they let us know how children are doing with the concepts that were presented in each unit. So they really are a critical component of what we do in terms of assessing math instruction moving forward. And there are about 11 of those in addition to the pre-test, the mid-year, and the post-test in mathematics. The end-of-unit assessments are relatively informal. It's not something, while we do have common procedures across the district for administering them, they are not something that we hype children up about and do 10 days of review for. It's just something that happens in the course of normal instruction. So we are certainly cognizant of the idea that over-testing children is not what is best for children, and it is something that we always keep in mind, that everything that we put in front of children is something that is useful for them and for their teachers.
I could just echo all of what Mrs. Gale just said, but I'll also add, just want to differentiate the term testing and assessment, so that we see assessment in a broader way than maybe what testing might bring to mind from our own experiences. And I point that out because well-designed assessments are instructional in and of themselves, and so So what we aspire to is certainly balancing, there's some testing that we have to do where students are in rows and they're quiet and they put their books under, under their seats and all of that. And certainly try to balance the amount of that we do. So we do have 8 to 10 common assessments, for example, in math. Each end of unit has a common assessment. So we try to balance that with actually doing instruction, I would say. But we're also aspiring to create assessments, tools that we can collect evidence of understanding that are also, again, instructional in nature. And so the document-based questions, for example, the claims, evidence, and reasoning tasks that students will have. So by doing the assessment, they're building their critical thinking skills and they're developing their science understanding just by engaging in the assessment itself. And so we are having some really good, messy conversations about that as well.
So you'd say that this is different in kind from MCAS testing or PARCC testing?
Absolutely.
Or mid-year testing or final testing?
Absolutely, absolutely. And even just in my now 6 years in Milton, I've seen at the middle school a marked difference, even in midterms. So when I was first at the Pierce, there were several days, 3 or 4 days of practicing for the midterm, and that has since gone away. And so that instead really thinking about what do we really want to know from students, what do we really want to understand about what they understand, and how can we best get that, and is practicing for the midterm for 3 or 4 days the best sort of use of time, and that has shifted dramatically in just the 6 years that I've been here.
And I agree very much with what Amy Gale and Karen Spalding have said. And I just wanted to point out, too, that when you look at the assessments that we spoke about tonight, I know in the high school we do have our regular tests, we have our mid-year and final, but a lot of the other assessments we're doing, the essay writing and the collaborative thinking tasks and the portfolio ideas, those are all not the standardized testing like you were saying, sitting in rows with the books on your desk. So we're trying to include other types of assessments to really round out the experience. I will say that there have been conversations at the high school regarding assessments, particularly with whether the state is going to go with PARCC or MCAS, how it's going to go, and also with snow days. We were talking about, perhaps we have a mid-year and a final. Do we want to change one of those assessments somehow? Maybe to do an alternative type assessment. And this is just conversation we've had. We haven't gone anywhere, but just talk about this. Maybe we want to do an alternative type assessment straight across the board for the mid-year. Maybe we want to do that for the final. Do something with like a portfolio, perhaps. Some schools have gotten rid of mid-years. That's out there too. So we've had that discussion because I know with the PARCC, there's the PBA, the performance-based part, and then the end of year. So that's 2 times your testing in the year. So I know this year has been a hard year because we're piloting the PARCC and we also have the MCAS, but when we chose the course or the classes that are testing, there are different groups of students. So we're very aware that there is a lot of testing going on, and we've had conversations about it. But with these assessments that we're talking about tonight, we're trying to include different types for the students. So it's not just pencil, paper, sit down, take a test, that type of thing.
Thank you.
Ms. Bagley-Jones?
Just to follow up on that, and again, you did an incredible job with your data in such a short time, too. It's pretty amazing. But just to follow up on that, Michelle, I do see in the student newspaper, if you read it yet, students' feelings about PARCC.
Yes.
Just thought I would share that.
They felt great about it, didn't they?
Sorry?
They felt great about it, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
Shall I, anyway, and there's another article, 7 Things Every Kid Should Master, and it talks about the pressure on standardized testing. So I'm just putting it out there to follow up with the question about how much testing there is. There does seem, and it's not anybody's fault, and we have to do it, and it's great that you guys are so organized, but wow, it's a lot for kids. So just putting that out there. The article spurred me on.
Ms. Kelly?
First of all, thank you very much. It is amazing to see, as Linda Lee referred to, how far the system has come with regard to all of this. And as John Phelan used to say, all of these are just check-ins, I hope, to help guide the teacher, to help you succeed in whatever it is that you're talking about. And the more creative that we can be, as I think you've just described, in terms of what those look like, not that they, necessarily have a certain 80%, 90%, et cetera, but they're just helping the teacher to help the student. So all these assessments you refer to, which again is amazing compared to where we were several years ago, did they impact children's grades, or is this just truly used to guide the teacher to help you throughout?
Well, I'll start with the elementary level. The Fountas and Pinnell and Scholastic Reading Inventory are not something that we use to impact grades. Those are strictly assessments that we use to understand where children are and to help inform our practice around reading. So they are certainly not something that are graded. They do generate a score or a level, but again, that's used to help guide children to finding appropriate books. And again, with the Fountas and Pinnell, helping us to determine what those particular teaching points are that each individual child may need. The math unit tests for the upper grades, first and second graders, we're not looking at them in terms of calculating a numerical grade, so I can't say that they certainly do that, but because they are based in standards, they are impacting in terms of how far along a child has come in terms of their understanding of grade level standards. But again, it's an informative tool more than it is a tool for grading at the lower grades. In the older grades, they begin to calculate those into more of a numerical average. The secondary programs, I think, can speak to grades a little bit differently than we can because most of our students are quite young and we're not calculating averages for 7-year-olds.
So in a similar way, our SRI data or our Fountas and Pinnell data would not feed into a grade. However, our common unit assessments do get calculated into the grade. At this point, the MARS performance-based tasks do not. We've had a lot of conversation, by the way, I should have prefaced by saying we've had a lot of conversation about which assessments should count towards a grade, and there's an argument on either side. Certainly our pre-tests do not, because those are solely, to inform us about sort of where students are when they come in. So it really depends on the assessment. At this point, we imagine that the DBQs eventually will, at least the final ones, will feed into a grade, potentially the claims, evidence, and reasoning. But again, it really depends on the assessment and what we're learning from it.
I will say that most of the high school assessments are counted in some way towards a student's grade, whether it's in, it might not be just a numerical grade, it could be counted in a, you might not get an 80 for it, but it might count in terms of like a participation or like in that sense. But I will say that most of the assessments at the high school level are counted in some way towards the student's grade.
And I guess the reason I ask it is this something that you tell the students that we're going to do this tomorrow, or we're having this test? I think the other comments is this putting additional stress because we're, when I went to school, you had a test, I don't know, every other, whatever. So are we doing this much more often now, and therefore there's a sort of anxiety that comes along with it? Or how is this impacting sort of the student's life, I guess is what I'm asking.
I think the teachers at the high school, they try to make it as part of practice. For example, like with the collaborative thinking tasks in the math, it's almost like any other type of problem. Like we're going to work on a problem on this day. So it's not this big, and this is the problem for the term. It's
Right.
not that type of presentation. So they make it part of their daily practice in that sort of sense. Same thing with the units in the essay, for the essay writing, for history and for English. It's just part of their daily practice. So it's not like this huge looming assessment that's coming.
That's great.
I'll just add to that. At the middle school level, especially sixth grade, it does take a little convincing that the pretest doesn't count because they are nervous and they don't believe us.
Right.
So we are definitely still working on shifting that culture a little bit because they want to do well and they want to perform well and so it's uncomfortable. And so we've been working on that a little bit and really trying to balance our need for wanting to know what they come in to the building knowing already with their level of anxiety and wanting to do well and all of that.
Could I answer to Mary Kelly's point, one other issue, that from the district level, all of these assessments, when the middle school was implementing the curriculum changes in the 6th grade, completely based on the data. The conversation began based on the student data. When the assistant superintendent and I travel to each elementary school, and we look at where we're going to deploy after each quarter, our reading specialists and support staff, completely based on the student data. So now that we have V here, we're going to be able to look district-wide and be able to see what we do now is, to the point about the spreadsheets, we go district to district. Well, we know that this school, after the 2nd quarter, we have to redeploy all of our reading specialists based on the student data. Now we're going to be able to still sit down with the principals, but make those decisions district-wide. So it's not one principal speaking up as years ago, I need more support. This is based on the student data and looking across the district. So you're talking about a pre-test, a post-test, a district, and then we're looking from the umbrella of the entire district and how to deploy our resources. So it's really driving instruction, but it's driving student achievement. And I'll turn it back to you. The elephant on the table before we leave this, to talk about PARC. We would be remiss if we didn't have these individuals on the line and the students over there that are eyeing me speak to the PARC. But I want to frame this by saying, I spoke with Chairman Walker, that last year we were in the pilot. So this year, grades 3 through 8, except for science, are taking the PARC exam. The high school, Michelle Cruiser alluded to, the 10th grade is still taking MCAS, and at grades 5, 8, and 10, it's 9 for the science, we're still taking the MCAS. But last year we did the pilot, and I got an email from an area superintendent who said that it was a catastrophe in their district. I think I shared it with the school committee. So I quickly wrote to all of our administrators and said, could you give me your feedback? I'm hearing from you, but formalize your feedback. Because of the practice last year, the work under the leadership of the Assistant Superintendent Sheehan, last year's Assistant Superintendent Phelan, and these principals and coordinators, they have anticipated every aspect of this PARC testing. And you should know as a school committee that when the testing started, the whole district went just to watch that first testing, to watch how it was implemented, to anticipate any problems. Our technology people have traveled from school to school. So I am very proud to tell you, and these administrators can speak for themselves, again, a lot of reinsurance from administrators to teachers, reassuring teachers, so they're reassuring students, and it's been almost, am I exaggerating, a flawless implementation. Without the support of the school system, the capital, and the MFE, we were ready with the equipment. We were ready with the computers, with the Chromebooks, and it speaks to the confidence. And I said, my goal is to have Milton Public Schools students compete in any arena, and this is going to give them the confidence to be able to compete on any test they're given or any assessment. So before we leave and I turn it back to Ms. Kelly because I interrupted her. Sorry, Chairman Walker. Do you want to speak to that elephant on the table about PARC?
Sure. So as Superintendent Gormley mentioned, doing the field test last year was absolutely invaluable in terms of, road testing it prior to this year. At the elementary level, you can imagine they were all somewhat nervous and excited about taking a taking a test on the computer. But what they found after the first day was that it wasn't as hard as they thought. All of the things that they had been doing during the course of the year had prepared them for it. Close reading during Reader's Workshop, thinking critically about mathematical concepts, all of those kinds of things prepared them to take this test. There's no such thing as traditional test prep anymore. Good teaching is test prep now. And I think the teachers, and myself especially, have appreciated the fact that most children aren't testing for any more than 90 minutes a day. So it's something that a fifth grader can test from 9 to 10:30 in the morning and then still have math that afternoon and still go to gym and still have music and all of those things. Whereas with MCAS, especially in grades 4 and 7, children could be testing all day long. That really takes quite a bit out of a small person. So I think that while we see more test sessions than we did with MCAS, they're much shorter, so it's not impacting the school day in as profound of a way. So I think the children handled it beautifully. I think the teachers handled it beautifully. I think from the technology department was supportive, and it couldn't have gone any better than it did. We had small technology glitches along the way, but there was nothing we couldn't fix, and I'm just so thankful we had the opportunity to do it this year. I was in front of you all last year when you voted on whether or not we would take Park, and I think it was a real gift to be able to experience this test this year because we were well prepared, very well prepared.
I will echo absolutely everything, again, that Mrs. Amy Gale said. We had, so we're still in the throes. We're just finishing up English Language Arts. We'll be moving on to math shortly. And the feedback from students has been quite similar, that they feel good about it, like they've accomplished something. I think the teachers maybe lost as much sleep as the students did because they were worried about doing it right and breaking Park, and we kept saying you can't break it, just refresh and log back in, and that solved 95% probably of anything that any bumps along the road. We've been reflective about the process too, and so we made an intentional choice to spread it out and only do one assessment that has spread it out over a number of days because we have all 3 grade levels testing. So we've been reflecting on that and whether or not we should double up and shorten the number of days that it stretches over. So we're thinking about that, getting feedback from students so that we can make some good choices about that. But it absolutely has been just far fewer bumps than any of us imagined, and it has everything to do with the rehearsal we went through last year, but I would say even more so what an incredible team. I can speak personally, obviously, about the Pierce Middle School, but I know it's true for the other levels, just the incredible people who work in this district. It's been pretty much flawless, for sure.
At the high school, we completed the grade 11 ELA. We have our math next week, and it went very smoothly at the high school. And although I know Amy said that her students were nervous and excited, I think some of the high school kids were, students were nervous and maybe not as excited. that's a feature of the high school student. So they were. I was surprised. We had great attendance. Not surprised. I was very pleased, I should say, and I expected of our high school students because our high school students are wonderful. They came in. They were on time. We had very few absences. They worked really hard. And the nice thing about it, when I asked the students afterwards, they said, hey, it wasn't that bad. You know, they liked that it was shorter. That was a big plus for them. And I thought that they worked really hard on it, and they did a very nice job. It went very smoothly. So I know it's another test, but I think it was very important for us to participate in it, and I think it was a really good experience. And they said that it really wasn't that bad. It wasn't too different from the MCAS. The setup of the questions were a little bit different, but not very far off.
Ms. Bagley-Jones.
Before, if any of the students wanted to speak, I just wanted to say something really quick. I think Superintendent Gormley's, no pressure or anything. I think Superintendent Gormley's point about the resources, like when you look at the results and you realize you might need to plug in another resource here because of the test results, I think that is really valuable. The things I worry about are for kids who have test anxiety. I worry about that. I also know that some kids like to test very well, and others don't. Kids right on the verge maybe don't need special ed, but maybe have some dyslexia or some other things. Absolutely hate and dread the testing. And I know at the high school, and I know we need them and it's good and there's positive parts about it. I know at the high school, one of the adjustment counselors, Jenny Bellevue, I'm blanking on her name, she was a student of mine, but she has a whole relaxation room now, which I think is a fabulous thing at the high school. Have you been in there yet? You should go relax there.
Yes, and they have. I've seen a lot of the students go around with the
Fidget toys.
different toys.
Yeah.
To help relax.
Yeah, and that's where my worry comes from, is I just think it's an awful lot of pressure, you know, juniors who are looking at colleges, you know, there's a lot out there. But I do think Superintendent Gormley's point about it helps you all decide where resources should go, I think that is really valid, so, thank you.
So I think that this was students.
Could I just
Matt,
say
go
one
ahead.
quick thing? So just to speak on just like all the things we've talked about with regards to Park, I think Park is definitely like important. It definitely gets rid of the stigma of MCAS week. I know like throughout middle school, elementary school, middle school, and my first couple years of high school is like, oh, this is MCAS week. I got to go to bed at 8 in the morning, get up, eat my big bowl of Wheaties, and then like all that stuff. So I think that definitely helps. I don't think it's necessary to have a 4-hour test when Park has really worked it down to 90 minutes. I think that's very important. One big problem that I have with Park and that I had taking it last year is I have done math my whole life on a pen, with a pen and piece of paper, where when I had to put that onto a computer and had to show work on a computer, it was very confusing. And we did get prepared, but I think that's something that we really, really, like with math teachers, and with the test prep thing, I could not agree more. Test prep should not be there. It should be good teaching. But with that, I think definitely a little bit of test prep is needed, just because most of us have gone our whole lives doing all of our math out on the piece of paper, showing our work.
Yeah.
My old math teacher. But yeah, I think that's very important. The whole Park definitely shortens it down. But one thing that does concern me a little bit is, and I know I talked about this last year a lot, is that we haven't seen our results yet. I believe we still have not seen our results from last year's math and then this year's ELA. I think that's something very important. Like, obviously, I know there's a formula that goes from MCAS to Park that's been kind of worked out, but I think it's very important that we see how we do on Park, how it works up with MCAS, and all those different things. And when the whole stress and relaxation and all those different factors, I think it's going to happen junior year and senior year of high school is a very stressful time. But I'll speak for myself and I think a good amount of students, I wouldn't say Park and MCAS is the main stressor. It's different, the SATs,
Right.
different stuff like that, I would say is the real stress. So I wouldn't put any stress on the Park exam. I think it's just another thing that we do need to do in the district.
You good? Did you have something else?
Just in terms of all of the data, and thank God you're taking on this task, what are other districts, do they have a tool or tools that they use for this that perhaps we need to purchase, or how do other districts do it, I guess?
I just came from Boston, so I can speak to this a little bit. Other districts struggle with the same problems of, how much assessment do you do? What kind of tools do you use to help teachers collect the data that they need to do? So I would say that everyone is honestly struggling with the same issue, where we have so much sources of data to draw from. The real question is how to really determine what is the most critical source to use, and then focusing on that and really developing the capacity of teachers to look at data, to interpret data, because if teachers can do all that, then they know how to adjust the instruction and what to do in the classroom. And that is the real key to increasing student achievement, really. It's not in looking at, all the different sources of data that are possible out there. It's really, maybe you have a couple of sources. What are you going to do with that to leverage what you need to do in the classroom?
Great, thank you.
Sheridan?
So I'll ask my Park question now, sorry. Just to clarify, so you mentioned that there's a test that the students are taking now, and then there's an end of the year Park assessment. So I think it would be helpful if you could just very briefly clarify what the difference is and how is that information presented, because as everyone's waiting and wondering what it's going to look like, how they're going to tie from MCAS to Park and show the student growth. But will it be presented separately? So you'll get one set of data for this PBA that we're doing now and another for the end of the year? Or, are they going to tie it together, and will it be a big picture question? You might not be able to answer that briefly, or you just don't know. I haven't heard the answer to that question, so.
So just to clarify, I was actually presenting this very thing to PTO right before I came here. Just to clarify the difference a little bit between the performance-based assessment, the PBA, which is what we're all in the throes of right now, and the end-of-year assessment. The performance-based assessment it tends to have more layers to the questions, tends to have more writing and explanation involved, still within the circle of what they call those skills and knowledge base for college and career, so really using evidence to support claims, things like that. End of year is a primarily multiple choice, still higher level questioning, but a shorter time span, so maximum 60 minutes as opposed to 90 minutes, which is some of the performance-based ones. We don't know yet what that reported data will look like. We have been told that folks far smarter than I and far smarter than others have figured out how to translate the results of the MCAS, of PARC into MCAS, so we can still have those growth percentiles. But even in terms of what a parent report might look like, will it identify standards that a student is generally stronger in compared to others? We don't have a lot of that information. At this point, we don't know exactly what it will look like.
But to the point Ms. Sheridan asked at the last meeting, we were contacted by DESE and by Marilyn Decker, who is heading up the PARC Scholars across the state, and we have our own Courtney Walsh Miller as a PARC Scholar. So Ms. Sheridan, you asked, and Mr. Walker rightfully told me not to answer the question at the last meeting until we checked. The results from PARC will not be out until September or October because of this calibration that they're going to work on over the summer. One would think, to Ms. Kelly's point, that you take a online test, you would get the results quickly. That's their intention before the school year ends in the coming years. But right now, our PARC Scholar indicated to us, and I shared with the school committee, that it will be September and October when these results are coming out.
So I think that this has been an important education for the school committee. I certainly have a much more detailed understanding of where we are, what we're doing, and why we're doing it. And I think there's still an important part of the discussion to be had, which is regarding the information in the appendix. So I'm going to have you back for return engagement, because I really think it's important for us to hear and for parents to hear what have we learned thus far about teaching and learning as a result of this work that we've been doing, and with regard to the data in the appendix, what does that tell us about student growth and student performance, and by across the district, by school, by grade level. So I think that we could benefit from that discussion as well, and arguably that's, as you said in your presentation, that's really what this is about. It should be directed at informing teaching and learning and ultimately affecting student growth and student performance. So you did such a good job. I'm going to have you back.
And so, Mr. Walker, to that point, when we asked for this presentation, the team said they felt like this was a book half read because Dr. Spalding had come last June and presented on behalf of the district. And so the team had said, you have this appendix, you have almost the story without the end of the story at the end of the year. So working around your schedules after school gets out, in late June, if we finish the 2-year cycle, if that would be agreeable.
Let's talk about that. I'm not sure that, let's talk about that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I have one happening that we should do now that's probably not on your list, but I was planning to do this last meeting before we lost the students. Mr. McCarthy has what I think is a very exciting announcement about his future.
Oh, you want me to do this here?
I do.
I've recently committed to play rugby at St. Bonaventure University this coming year.
Wait, that's not the best part.
What else?
Didn't you get a scholarship?
I did, yes. I did receive a merit-based and academic athletic scholarship for that, so it's very exciting. We will be playing in the Division 1A conference of the, I think it's the East. It's the Northeast Conference, and I'll be playing with the East teams. So we'll be playing different schools like Army, Cutston, Buffalo University. So it's it's definitely a big step in the right direction in fact of my academic career and my rugby career, so I'm very excited.
That's great.
Congratulations.
Good for you.
Yeah, I have that right now. Wait, are we in happenings yet?
Since we're
Too.
Listen, you're in charge. Take over right now.
Okay, so I'll be very brief. First of all, so I'd just like to speak about the rugby team a little bit. We played Newport this past Sunday in a very muddy game down at the Fort Adams in Newport. We won 35-10, so that was a very good start to the season. We were able to get all the players in, and it looks like we're going to have a great year. We have over 55 players this year. It's the largest the team has ever been, with, I think, over 20 freshmen. So it really shows the team's going in the right direction. And as captain this year, I'm very happy to see where I'm leaving the team. And then to go to the Tulip Day. This Saturday from 9 to 1 at Cunningham Park, so Cunningham Hall, in that parking lot, we will be having a yard sale. So we'll be selling different items, household items that we've brought come together from the team, all very good condition items. And also we will be selling tulips for those last minute Easter presents. So anyone that needs a tulip, we ordered a lot of them. So this fundraiser is virtually going towards anybody that's been involved in rugby in the past knows that after every rugby game, it's tradition, for the higher levels, it's tradition to go to the sponsor pub. We don't do that in high school. So we have team dinners. So what we'll do is, especially like when a school comes from sometimes over an hour away to 2 hours away, what we'll do is we get either pizza, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and that's all either through parent contributions or any money we have in our team account. So I think it's very important. First, I'd like to give a shout out to Erica Donahue, who does the most amazing job with the rugby team. She's been the rugby team mom for, I think it's 3 or 4 years now, and she's just done an amazing job, and she's contributed a lot of time and effort towards this. So I think this team fundraiser will be able to get a lot of that burden of trying to find parent contributions, and by raising money, we'll be able to buy that ourselves. So I think that's very important. Then my second announcement, a different fundraiser. So the student leaders here at Milton High School we are a club group type thing, and we work to kind of bring in the freshmen every year. I was actually partnered up with Allie Jones last year, and what we do is we bring the freshmen to the high school, we meet them at orientation, we meet our group, and then throughout the year we go into their homerooms every now and then to talk. We do health and wellness things, we do stuff on midterms, kind of midterm prep. A lot of freshmen are coming from middle school, and it's a very big change. So one thing we decided to do at the beginning of this year is Milton High School is such a charitable, community-based town. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to get behind a cause. So what we decided to do, actually in this very room in the summer while we were planning, was we decided to get behind veteran benefits. So what we decided to do is we've teamed up with the New England Center for Homeless Veterans, and they have what's called a welcome home package that they give to veterans that move from the shelter into their own homes for the first time. So what we did as student leaders is we created 2 welcome home baskets. So virtually what we did is you get different items such as like bathroom supplies, cutlery, cups, just anything that you would need, everything that I think we take advantage of. We don't understand where the toothpaste sometimes, at least I don't, where the toothpaste it's in the bathroom already. And I think we don't really understand what that actually costs and what it takes. So by creating these home baskets, we really got a feel for what it actually does. So what we're now doing is we're doing a school-wide fundraiser where we're asking people to donate items such as cutlery, hampers, just different type of kitchen supplies, virtually anything you could think of that goes to a new home, we would love. So what we're doing is we're collecting those supplies up until April 10th, and the drop-off will be in either Mr. Shaw or Dr. Fitzgerald's room before or after school. So we'd love if we could get some items. We're trying to get a lot of items so then we can distribute them in a couple different home baskets.
And if anybody's watching and they don't know where those classrooms are, they can donate items and drop them off at the front office.
Yes, definitely. Anything that is dropped off at the front office, one of the student leaders or a teacher will be able to bring down to their room. So virtually anywhere you would like to drop them off, you can send them in with students, especially freshmen. We're trying to get the freshmen behind this. We're actually working with our homerooms. With my homeroom, I created a list. Everybody kind of has their own assigned item that they volunteer. And the great thing about it was they volunteered for the item. I read off a list, and I saw hands shooting up left and right saying, oh, I want to bring this. Like, oh, I have this at home. I can bring this in. So it's really good to see, like, the enthusiasm behind this event. And I think that's one of the most important things, at least for me at Milton High School, was doing these community-based fundraisers. So any items, drop off at the main office or Mr. Shaw or Dr. Fitzgerald's room. Thank you.
Excellent.
The edited FY 15-16 school year calendar. I think maybe the next meeting we'll stop talking about snow, but driven by the weather this year, and you don't have to, you pick up a newspaper anytime and you're reading about the situations in school districts that had to cancel so many days of school that it's forcing their school calendar to go on Saturdays, April vacation. So listening to the feedback from parents who contacted me about this issue, for next year, I put in my email blast the question on a survey: would you prefer that school be in session on Yom Kippur next year, September 23rd, 2015, and Good Friday, March 25th, 2016, so that school would end earlier? And so I put the school calendar in. What the results of the survey are that 71.8% of the parents and staff replied yes. They would rather go to school on those 2 days and get out of school earlier in June. I call it 2 days in the bank earlier. And to the no, 28.1%. I had my monthly PTO meeting this week, and I've gained the feedback from the PTO presidents who are in 100% support of the revising the school calendar. And I want to say to the public that I am as sensitive as anyone else to the religious holidays, and I've worked my entire career as an administrator over the Jewish holidays to direct our teachers not to have any long-term assignments or tests on those days. So I would commit with changing this calendar to direct our teachers from my office, from me directly, through our principals, that on these days, no tests would be given, no long-term assignments would be due on those days, so that families whose children and students choose to take those days off, they could without having to miss assignments. And just as we do now over the some of the holidays over the years, teachers can use their personal time if in fact they feel on either of these holidays, religious holidays, that they want to use their personal time to take the day off. So I have put to observe their religious practices. So I put in front of you a revised calendar that includes going to school on Yom Kippur and going to school on Good Friday, and the end of school pending no snow next year, would be June 16th. I would say to you that we would look at this at the next year and analyze and survey how the results were. But I want to tell you, this might be an excellent year next year to put this in place, because Labor Day is so late that we don't go back to school until September, and we go to school before Labor Day. And so my recommendation is a revised school calendar for next year, with going to school on these two religious holidays, and the last day of school now will be June 16th.
Ms. Padera?
Superintendent Gormley, did we reach out to any of our, I know we kind of keep in contact with our religious leaders to see what their feedback was on this. My only concern is, we did put that out to everyone, but it seems like about 500 people responded, which is about 15% of the school population, and 30% of those said no. So I have two questions for you. Did we reach out to them just to see how they feel, to be sensitive about this? And also, do we have any other Jewish holidays off on the calendar as well?
Well, two things. One, Rabbi Benjamin from our temple in Milton came to me years ago, and we didn't have the Jewish holidays off in Milton. And so what he asked on behalf of the members of the temple was that we would have Yom Kippur off, and if Yom Kippur was on a weekend, we would have the second day of Rosh Hashanah. And so I tell Chairman Walker, I went to school with students and children and peers of the Jewish faith, so I understand that the second day of Rosh Hashanah, many parents used to say to me, why the second day and not the first? And it was the rabbi who came and said, again, if Yom Kippur is on a school day, would you have Yom Kippur off? If Yom Kippur is on a weekend, would you have the second day of Rosh Hashanah connected to a weekend? And so the rabbi, did I not forward you his email?
You might have.
You did. Did I? I forwarded the rabbi, I reached out to the rabbi because he had approached me, and he communicates with me often. And I'm invited to his home for the Seder either night this weekend, which is very moving for me. And so he reached out and he wrote to the members of his congregation that he appreciated its democracy. He was very eloquent in saying that Christmas is a commercial holiday. He still would like for us to have Yom Kippur off. And so he contacted me and gave me that reply. Again, I respond to, there are parents who are called, and they were very, very concerned about having to take so many days off this year for snow. That was beyond my control, and it was the weather and safety issues. There were also, June is an issue. You're talking about park, and when you take park and the heat of June, the instruction takes place really in these formative months that we were just talking about. And so after what we went through with this year, starting school so late next year, I think that going to school on these 2 days and then analyzing what happens next year would be my recommendation. And I realize what you're saying, but these, it also tells me these are the people, I take the liberty of thinking everyone reads my email blast, and so these are the people who have a feeling about the issue. Maybe the other people are saying it's up to the school administration and the school committee to make the determination. And I want to tell you, my PTO presidents, which you were one, they get the feedback from their schools. And I've never gotten feedback from the PTO presidents. We have a code among us, and I run lots of ideas by them. And to a PTO president, they were in support.
Sheridan?
So my question is about the calendar. Aren't these dates negotiated with the union in terms of days off? Is that part of their contract?
No.
So,
what's
okay.
negotiated. I did get a passionate email from a parent
Thanksgiving is
who
on.
wants to go to school, wants us to go to school the day before Thanksgiving. That's in the contract. Also in the contract is you have to be done by the last day of June, but these are not decisions. And again, the email blast went to all the teachers and parents, and I did communicate with the head of the MEA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who only had one vote. Whether she voted or not, I don't know.
Mr. Zulus?
So I have a couple of questions. Do we know what the universe of respondents was? I mean, there's about 4,000 students, but there's, a number of parents.
Yes.
So do we know what we
Oh,
see
how many-
500 responded, so the universe is maybe 2,000, 2,500? I mean, I'm guessing.
I'm not going to
in terms of-
say that number because I
I'm
don't
just-
know the exact number.
This
Total
just
number
goes to
of
the
families.
percentage. Yeah, total number of families, yeah.
Potential parents.
Because, as Becky suggested, the response is, depending on the number of respondents, could be anywhere from 12 to 25%. And if it had gone the other way, would the recommendation have gone the other way? Is this
Absolutely.
This is purely driven on this survey?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
No, well, I say it's absolutely. Again, I've had let me just say to you that I shared with Chairman Walker, and you received feedback. There was lots of feedback about the days off this year. A lot of families had to take the days off, and there was a lot of feedback about the school calendar. Again, some people want to take a week in March and eliminate February and April. Well, we test every day in March for Park. The superintendents you saw in the Globe, I've given you in your green folder a copy of the article. The superintendents were all surveyed, and the superintendent said, you have to explain to the public that with Park testing, until the commissioner changes that, we can't do that. And so a lot of districts are looking at ways to be creative, and they're looking at February vacation, they're looking at April, and there are a few days, like the day before Thanksgiving and these holidays. A lot of districts who had to take more days off than we did are now going to school on Good Friday. So I have to tell you, we discussed it at the leadership team, and I said, if you survey the parents and teachers, it's the kind of community that you get feedback.
And so because of the park testing, there's no option with the February, April?
Right.
You could do it later in February or earlier in April? There's no way to do it that way?
Not right now.
Okay.
But again, I'll share with you the actual, the Globe wrote up the survey that we were all given, and one superintendent said, you have to explain to the public this. It's an issue.
Ms. Bagley Jones?
Sorry.
And I think that's a good point, Mike, but I do think that this was a creative idea on your part, Mary. The parents really pushed us on the schedule and asking why we couldn't think outside the box, and this is thinking outside the box. And it's good that folks their kids won't get penalized if they do take these off as religious holidays, and there won't be higher, the test scores and all that. And I do think the reasoning, and I want to be clear about this, so I'm not saying the holidays aren't important, but I do think that going to school in June, late in June, is not educationally sound, Superintendent Gormley said, and we've also gotten pushback over the years about starting before Labor Day, but we saw the importance of that this year, and kids are also fresh from being off for the summer, and those two things, not little as time as possible in June and early as possible in August, I just think is better educationally. My last point is, I don't think it's a good message to give that this is driven only by the parents. That's what I'm trying to say, is that there's good educational reasoning behind it by Ms. Gormley, and it's not like if another parent group came out next week with another survey, we would flip-flop back. I don't want people to get that message.
Well,
that
I
it would be
surveyed,
different.
to your point in Mr. Zulus's question, I surveyed, in another district, there was no survey of parents when this was done,
Right.
and staff. So I said, if we survey the parents and staff, we don't over-survey, so when we ask a question, we get honest feedback.
Ms. Sheridan?
No, that was me.
Oh,
Sorry.
Ms. Padera?
I'm Mrs. Panera. I don't want to get...
How are you?
Great.
Good.
I don't want to get into a discussion of every day, but I'm just curious. September 4th, you have off too. Is that...
This was when the prior superintendent, Dr. Jaffoon, as I gave credit to her before her time, implemented before Labor Day. This was in response to Milton Public School families. And so what happens, the teachers come back, and then the children come, the students come for 2 days, and that gives families the long weekend. And that has been famously popular response from families and staff alike. And I have to tell you, as an educator, coming back from the summer, having students for 2 days, and then 4 days, and then the 5 days working back into school is really advantageous, rather than coming back the first week after the summer and having 5 straight days. It works. But I appreciate, I think you might be looking creatively at this, try to find another day.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be sensitive, because I think this is, the thing is, I think we all know that, the Jewish community isn't a huge part of our population, so I'm sensitive to the survey results being high, even though Good Friday's in there as well. I think Good Friday is, from what I understand, is kind of celebrated later, from my knowledge of it, and I'm a little bit less knowledgeable about Jewish holidays, but that day is important to them, and because our leaders have said it's important. I just want to be. It just seems, we did have a big reaction with the snow, and that gets all hyped up that was a historic snow year, and I think our administrators did great with it, and we limited our days quite a bit. The chances of that happening next year are, slim. So I just, I don't know, I don't feel all that comfortable about taking this day back.
And so one other thing, and I appreciate that, is that I think it's important, I don't know if I stressed it enough, I personally write to the teachers about this issue, and I've educated 5 athletic directors on this issue, that there are not practices. I educate the entire Bay State League, if the truth be told. That there are not practices after school on the Jewish holidays, that there are not games, that once the sun goes down, the practices have to be over. Students have to have time to get home. So we are very, very sensitive, and this first year that we would do this, again, long-term assignments, and when I was a principal, any teacher who wanted to take a religious holiday used their personal time, and any family knew that, again, teaching and learning were going to go on, but no tests or long-term assignments.
Ms. Kelly?
I guess I just want to bring up the religious diversity of our community, and that there may indeed be other religions that have other holidays that we should be celebrating. And so, in my mind, given the dilemma, I think this is probably the fairest way to all, with all of the caveats that you've just described, Superintendent Gormley, in terms of how the days will be different in expectations. But I think we might even consider that for other religious holidays, because there are many. So, I think this is a very good proposal to basically address the concerns that parents have raised over this year, and keeping, to your point, educational soundness and the timing of when the kids were in school. So I think it's a very good suggestion.
Mr. Zulus?
Just one final thing. I appreciate all the work and the thought that's gone into this. I'm not prepared right now to vote for a change. So if we vote now, I'll vote against the change. On further reflection, I may be in favor of it, but I'm just not prepared right now to do that. But I do appreciate all the effort and the thought and the response that was done here.
Do I have a motion for approval of the revised 2015-2016 calendar?
So moved.
Second.
On the motion, all in favor? 4-2. Zulus and Padera opposed.
Thank you. I wanted to provide the viewing public with an update. Framing that we worked with Finance Subcommittee and our CPAC that we were going to lead an evaluation of our special ed program, pre-K through students who are in transition programs through the age of 21. And so with the guidance of the Finance Subcommittee, we went and sought proposals, and we only received 2 proposals, and there was a huge difference in the proposals, the amount of money for the proposals. So under the guidance of the Finance Subcommittee, we created, working with our attorney, an RFP, and we publicly advertised that RFP, and as of this morning, it's open until May 1st. We have 9 proposals that have come in. 9 individuals and firms and consultants asking for our proposal. And so that's a really good indicator. I want to tell Finance Subcommittee how much I appreciated that. And so we're going to go through May 1st. So this will push out the SPED evaluation, hopefully into the end of this school year and into the fall and over the summer. And I keep informing the CPAC, who are very excited about this prospect. So I just wanted to give you an update about that.
Full-day kindergarten.
Full-day kindergarten? Oh, we're moving full-day kindergarten to under,
Ms. Bagley Jones?
Can I just ask a question about happenings? So the Challenger Division is not a school event, but it's something that you put in our packet?
yes.
Can we
Maybe-
say what it is?
Sure, maybe under happenings, I'll bring that one
Oh,
up.
I thought we were on happenings.
Oh, I had forgotten, and Mr. Walker just reminded me that we
Oh,
moved.
I apologize.
We moved full-day kindergarten to under the superintendent's report. We have been notified by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and from the, the State House, right, Glenn, that there's a potential right now, or the governor recommended in his budget, to eliminate the full-day kindergarten grant. And so this is a process. Glenn, do you want to, for next year, Glenn, do you want to give a brief update on that?
In the governor's budget proposal for next year, as the superintendent says, the funding for the kindergarten enhancement grants would be eliminated. Today, a letter is going out. Ada Rose Marin, who is our full-day kindergarten consultant, drafted a letter that is going out through the PTOs to parents. We'll link to it in the superintendent's e-blast, urging people to contact their legislators about this issue. The full-day kindergarten grant is important to introduce kindergarten into a lot of districts. We get $150,000 a year, or we did until this year, till the 9C cut brought it back to $120,000. And it's an important part of the program, and being able to afford the program. The rationale behind eliminating it was that students we would get additional Chapter 70 funding for students if we didn't have the grant. The issue is, if you don't have tuition, you do get additional Chapter 70 funding, but it's not enough to make up for the loss of the tuition and the grant. The tuition and the grant to Milton bring in about $1.1 million a year. The additional Chapter 70 funding we would get, which would be a year in arrears, would only be about $850,000. So the only way to make this basically self-supporting is we would have to come up with $1.1 million for next year to fund the program entirely by ourselves, and then $250,000 a year from that point onwards to sustain the program. That's to sustain it without tuition. If you charge tuition, you don't get any Chapter 70 funding for that second half of the, we get Chapter 70 funding based on half days for the kindergarten students. If you charge any tuition, you don't get Chapter 70 funding based on full days. So it's a bind. For a lot of communities, they can do this because their Chapter 70 is sufficient. Milton is one of those communities that's very disadvantaged under the Chapter 70 formula. We've heard that before, that allegedly the minimum share of foundation budget that's supported by Chapter 70 funds is 17.5%. Milton is one of those communities that doesn't even get that. They're on a very slow catch-up schedule to try to bring us up to the minimum, which is an interesting concept, that you have to work your way up to the minimum. So our funding for Chapter 70 is so marginal that, in fact, this doesn't make any sense for us. Some of the larger cities, for instance, don't need tuition because the Chapter 70 money per student is sufficient to actually fund the program. So this will be in front of the Joint Ways and Means Committee meetings, which are coming up Tuesday and Thursday of next week, as the House crafts its budget and the Senate crafts its budget. And there is a push from supporters of full-day kindergarten across the state to try to get the word into our legislators to say that full-day kindergarten grant funding is an important part of school funding, and that full-day kindergarten, of course, is an important part of the educational life of these children. So keep an eye out. You will see through the PTOs and through the superintendent's e-blasts notices about this, where to contact your representatives, and with some sample talking points, a sample letter to go out to encourage them to restore the full-day kindergarten grant.
So to that point, we had Milton resident and advocate, thank you, Glenn, Ada Rose Marin, come to the PTO presidents. And so Ada Rose Marin is communicating with the PTO presidents, giving them a data sheet on the importance of this full-day kindergarten grant to the Milton Public Schools, and giving them the names and addresses of our legislative delegation, so that, why we're reaching out to the entire Ada is working through the PTO presidents, is that individuals who might not have rising kindergartners all understand the value of full-day kindergarten and how important these funds are, so that everyone understands we rely on the funds and the tuition to run the full-day kindergarten program. And so I told the story that we were charged by one of your peers, Bern Lovely, I can still hear his voice raising, and he said, implement full-day kindergarten, but it has to be self-funded. And through the grant and the tuition, that's what's enabled us to do that. And we have 98% Milton Public School parents vote with their feet. They're very smart consumers. And we have 98% of our kindergartners in full-day kindergarten. And so that's really a testimony to the program. And I know that when Ada Rose Marin communicates with families of, and all citizens, that they'll be able to speak up on the importance of these funds.
So just to add that for those parents who are looking at kindergarten next year, should we lose the grant, in order to make up the money to fund the program, tuition, which we had set at $3,700 for next year, would have to rise by approximately $600 to $4,300, again with the sliding scale that we implement for families in need. That would be the effect on potential the potential effect on tuition next year. When we voted the kindergarten tuition last November, the sheet did say that at the time, subject to a funding of the grant, and that without the grant it would be about $4,350 for tuition. It indicates it would be about $4,300, but in any case, it's a not insubstantial rise in tuition for full-day kindergarten should we lose the grant.
So I think that would certainly be the impact, but in order for that to actually be the tuition, the superintendent would have to make a recommendation, and the school committee would have to approve such a recommendation. But Dr. Pavlicek, can you talk a little bit about the budget process, because I understand there's some time sensitivity, and I'm not sure that the schedule that we have articulated gets us there. If we're looking to influence the budget process by interested constituents writing letters, how quickly do we need to do that?
Quickly. As I said, the first meetings of the Joint Ways and Means meetings for House and Senate on the budget are next week, Tuesday and Thursday of next week. I saw the communication from Ada Rose Marin today. It went out to the PTO presidents today. Hopefully, we'll get that out. We'll get a notice out in tomorrow's e-blast about this. We're giving email and phone contacts. At this point, that is probably preferable to mailing things in through snail mail, although faxes, as becoming antique as they are still good at that. It's much, you have to pick up a fax and throw it away. Email, you can just hit delete. So faxes are actually really good with legislators. So, I mean, but it is time sensitive. Really, this is something that needs to get done realistically in the next week or so to get, get the word out.
So we're working hard to get that word out. So in closing, you heard Ms. Hughes.
Ms. Sheridan?
Sorry, I was
Excuse
just
me.
going to ask, because there might be people who don't have children in the schools that would love to be able to support this venture. So is there a way to get that information if you don't get your email blast, or you don't, how can we post that? Can we put it on the webpage or
Yes.
something to
We'll put it
to
on
share
tomorrow
with
morning.
Good.
all constituents?
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's wonderful. And in closing, you heard Ms. Hughes talk about next week. You can go out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night. Posted on the front of the webpage will be which school, PS Monday night, Glover and Milton High School Tuesday, Cunningham Wednesday, Tucker and Collycott Thursday, and you'll see 4,000 pieces of student art sampled that you saw tonight. And they'll give you a passport too, and you can have your passport stamped at each school. And you will see very proud students and families at each of those schools that night. Very briefly, I want you to circle on your calendars.
I was just going to
Oh,
ask,
excuse me.
what time is it?
Great. 5:30 to 7:30 on Monday night at the PS. Glover, 6 to 7:30 on Tuesday night. Milton High School, 6:30 on Tuesday night. Cunningham, 6 to 7:30 on Wednesday night. Tucker, 6 to 7:30 on Thursday night. And Collycott, 6:30 to 7:30 on Collycott. At Collycott. We'll put those all up on the web. And the Collycott One Book Adventure Night, very moving experience, is Thursday night. So that's 2 events. You won't be able to get a parking space on Edgehill Road that particular night, a very moving night. Circle on your calendars. This is very exciting news. The MFE told me today, 110, was that the email? 110 nominations for the Teacher of the Year. From parents, peers, high school students, and so those, they aren't Mary Gormley's favorite teachers, it's the MFE runs it, and they have read every application, and they have, that's true, don't you, Ms. Padera?
They might be your favorite teachers, but
Right.
you didn't have a vote on it. I
Right,
know that.
and so they have selected based on the applications, and someday to be announced, so it's a surprise, the MFE and school committee will be invited. Mr. Walker's smiling, I think it's his favorite morning. We arrive in the room, and it's like the sweepstakes, and come in with food and balloons, and the teacher doesn't know what happened, and we leave, and at 8:30, and leave them with the treats and the balloons, and they make the announcement, and then circle on your calendars April 30th. These individuals, I've seen families come from Washington and Florida and Illinois for the ceremony when the MFE recognizes these 6 teachers of the year, 1 from each school, and 1 teacher who has demonstrated leadership skills in the name of one of our prior superintendents, Dr. Mary Grasser O'Neill. So circle that night on your calendar. Another night to circle on your calendar, April 16th, a friend of the Milton Public Schools, nationally recognized in building resiliency in children and helping families through crisis, Dr. Maria Trozzi. And Maria is a friend of the Milton Public Schools. Every time we need her, she's there within 24 hours. She lives in neighboring Dorchester. We're the proud recipients of her first grandchild at the Collycott School. And Maria Trozzi was at Columbine. And she's called across the nation to go to schools, and she's going to speak to Milton Public School parents and any citizens who want to attend at the PS Auditorium at 7 o'clock on April 16th on building resiliency in your children. And so it's a wonderful follow-up to the CPAC's presentation Ms. Kelly attended, It was phenomenal. I told the CPAC your feedback, and we're going to check with Milton Cable that was filmed and it's going to be replayed, but we had 100, at least 100 in the audience.
Yeah, good.
And so lastly, per Miss Bagley-Jones, who's crossing over between the green folder and the happenings, two friends of the Milton Public Schools, Milton Public School parents Jerry Vitti and J.P. Plunkett, single-handedly, I think with Ms. Padera as their assistant also, have implemented this Challenger Division baseball league.
Yeah, it's.
And so on the front of the web, they'll take top billing, but miltonnationall.com, you can go on to register. The registration deadline is April 15th. We'll put this out high and wide and across the entire town, but they are the individuals. They should be recognized as the volunteers of the year. And the most engaging Sunday afternoons, Ms. Padera, you told me you've ever had.
It's so much fun. I can't wait. One way or the other. The snow's going to be melted or not, but we're going to be starting it up.
So the Little League Challenger event league registration is beginning.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Since I don't read French.
Yes, so I think that I don't speak French also, too, but Dr. Pavlicek and Ms. Sheehan were at that event, and they might speak better. I was at your event. I think I was at your health and wellness. Dr. Pavlicek and
I
Ms.
actually wasn't at this event.
Ms. Sheehan?
Yes, I was part of this. Maybe we should have it in English. Yes.
So Dr. Fisher, our coordinator of world languages, she organized an event where she invited students, French-speaking students, and actually some English-speaking students from other districts to meet the Consul General of Canada, the Consul of France, and other dignitaries. And they came and they spoke to our own Milton Public School students and visiting students. I believe there was a group from New Bedford, and I'm not sure of the other town. I think that there were at least about maybe 400 students who participated, and the French or Canadian consul brought a film, which I was not able to stay and watch, but Dr. Fisher said that it was so dynamic and compelling that she said she was actually going to have a copy that she was going to pass around, so and said it was a must-see. So the students participated in a number of activities and games, and the idea was to celebrate countries of the world that speak French.
Thank you. And we are the proud host or hostess of this event every year. So there are 6 or 7 schools, a couple of high schools from Boston attend, and all of the students join in on these activities. Thank you. Oh, and in closing, one more thing, and this does impact somebody at the table. So I shared with you that we have 3 teams going to Mass Maritime for the Future Problem Solving Bowl. So of all of the students that participate, there are some very, very brave students who say, my team may not have been chosen, but I will go and I will compete as an individual. So I will be given the book. I won't have 3 other team members, and I will do all the research myself, and I will sit down and compete individually. So I'm proud to announce that the following students will be competing at Mass Maritime.
Let me guess, there's a Padera in there.
Our own June Padera and Alix Benoit from Pierce, Carolyn Gannon from Cunningham, Lydia Gatnick from Glover, Grace Kelly and Lucas Quijano from Tucker, Lila Glenn and Tyler Kennedy from Collycott. Now, it happens to be my favorite program, so this has nothing to do with the publicity around it. But over the years, maybe one student volunteered to go for an individual competition. So this speaks to, and remember, does anybody remember what the topic is?
I should know. I have a lot of comments.
If Becky doesn't know, none of us have.
Enhancing human potential. So big round of applause for those.
Okay.
I will just say one more thing about future problem solvers. When your 11-year-old starts using the word propaganda well and correctly while reading the Boston Globe, you know there's something about problem solvers. It's the right program to have in our schools.
Ms. Kelly?
Did we do the minutes?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
I put that under
Thought I-
the chairman's report since we didn't do it at the beginning. Okay, chairman's report. Michael?
Yes.
So I'm distributing, with Mr. Zulus's help, a copy of the report that we've received from the Stone Turn Group. A little bit of history. Last August, the superintendent reported that a Norfolk County grand jury had issued an indictment against a former Milton Public Schools employee who was accused of misappropriating school funds. Even prior to that, of course, this came to our attention in late 2013, and immediately we began the process of looking for an accounting firm that could assist us in looking at some of the issues that this raised. And I'm pleased to announce that we did find the Stone Turn Group, which has an excellent record with regard to experience with municipal finance and schools finance. Specifically, what we asked them to do was to review our policies and procedures regarding the collection of funds from students and participants in our sponsored programs, to evaluate existing cash management practices and assist in creating a comprehensive policy, and to test a sample of expected payments by students and program participants over the previous 5 years. They did accomplish all of those things and found 3 key areas that required attention. Lack of separation of duties regarding the cash collection process, the lack of a process to review the amounts that have collected as a part of this process, and no requirement for the retention of certain documentation. So they completed an extensive review. They created a model cash management policy for us to approve. That was reviewed by our policy committee, and we did approve a cash management policy on the recommendation of our policy subcommittee. So this report will be posted tomorrow on our website, but I believe that we accomplished the purpose we set out to accomplish, which was to ensure that we had taken every step possible to ensure that this type of situation would not occur again. So this is just for information. Any questions?
Looks great.
Thanks. Next is a request by the superintendent to appoint a new director of pupil personnel services. You have in your package a memo from the superintendent that requests that Tracy Grandow be appointed. I'm going to add the words in that first sentence, effective today, March 27th, I'm recommending Tracy Ann Grandow for the position of Administrator of Pupil Personnel Services at an annual salary of $105,000. This individual was interviewed by 2 screening committees. We were well represented by our own Rebecca Padera. That screening committee recommended to the finalist screening committee, Ms. Grandow. I think it's important to point out that our CPAC chair was also on the initial screening committee and supports this recommendation, as do all of our principals. So it seems to me that it's probably safe to say we have the right candidate.
may I say something?
Superintendent?
There's one mistake. Ms. Padera served on both screening committees. That's my mistake. So her name should be on the final screening committee. And Ms. Grandau will begin on July 1st.
As soon as we vote.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
We do.
Do I have a motion?
So, did you make the motion? It's so moved?
So moved. Moved and seconded.
Could you
Ms.
just
Kelly?
repeat the motion, please?
The motion is to appoint Tracy Ann Grandau for the position of Administrator of Pupil Personnel Services at an annual salary of $105,000,
Effective July 1st.
effective July 1st.
And just on the salary, that's not a Unit B position.
No, it came out of the union as a result of the previous collective bargaining with MEA.
And is there a number of days, let me back up. Is there a contract that will follow this appointment?
Yes.
That we will then, because then I will stop asking any questions?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
A letter. On the motion, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. A very brief budget update. In our last meeting, Dr. Pavlicek reported that the warrant committee had voted to restore $120,000 to the schools, and based on the restoration priorities that we voted, that will allow us to put back all of the art and music and chorus cuts that had been proposed at the elementary level. And hopefully with a few more funds, we'll be able to get to the second, it's actually the third priority, but we had a different strategy for STEP with regard to the Milton middle school and high school electives in art, music, and so forth. Ms. Kelly, you're frowning.
I know, I don't have the list in front of me. I thought that the funding only got us part way through some of the art and music. Is that correct?
Well, it does. It got us all the way through the elementary 2.0, which was 90,000, and some ways into the middle school and high school art and music.
Got it. Thank you.
So that was the good news. At the same meeting, they voted to take $186,000 from the capital request that we made for iPads, which would have funded iPads for special education students in classrooms, iPads for teachers, and iPads for all of the schools, and to allocate that to the snow and ice budget that has now exceeded $1.2 million. I indicated to the chair of the warrant committee that it would have been helpful to consult with the school committee if the warrant committee determined that they needed more money for snow and ice, since we had had some previous conversations regarding that, and they had assured me and the superintendent that we were okay. That means that no funds from the school department would be required. The best they could offer is that if the Pickens override is approved, that would be restored immediately. So, stay tuned, and we'll see how that plays out. Do I have a motion to approve the June 25th, 2014 minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Zulus, seconded by Ms. Padera. Is that Ms. Padera?
That's me. Still here.
On the motion, all in favor?
Edits, sorry.
Yeah, edits?
I have some edits.
Go right ahead.
So under the superintendent's report, topic
Yeah.
1, on the first page.
Yep.
The 1, 2, 3, 4 sentence down, it says, they noticed across the board concerns. I think that should read of below grade level literacy skills, rather than for literacy skills below grade level. That doesn't make sense. And then on the second to last page, I have this, I'll give it to you. Under topic 2, under the Finance Subcommittee, it says at Finance Subcommittee, there was an analysis, we just need the word "of" there, of what the increases would be.
With those modifications, all in favor? It's unanimous. Finance Subcommittee?
Approval of vendor warrants. Warrant.
Warrant, yes, we have one vendor warrant on warrant number 52, dated April 2nd, in the amount of $249,007.60.
So I would move that we approve vendor warrant number 52 in the amount of $249,007.60.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Kelly, seconded by Mr. Zulus. Any discussion? On the motion, all in favor? 4 in favor, 1 abstention, Ms. Kelly.
And that's all we have.
And that is all we have. Transportation and Traffic Safety Subcommittee?
The quick update, 2 things. One, our survey went live. Our survey, parent-guardian survey on travel for their students went live on March 30th. Will be live until the Friday before vacation, which is April 17th, I believe. And I understand that the surveys, hard copies of the surveys, will be going in backpacked. So so parents and guardians should have the opportunity to participate in that survey. And then, well, actually 3 things. Second thing is we're continuing to collect information about traffic and transportation issues, and we hope to review those with the Chief of Police in the not-too-distant future. And then third, May 6th is Walk and Bike to School Day, and so we are hoping to work with the schools to generate as much interest, enthusiasm, and publicity in that as possible. That's the update.
Thank you. Next meeting agenda items, I don't have any immediate, that is, next meeting agenda items, but 2 follow-up items from last meeting. At some point soon, we're looking for 2015-16 goals for the parent liaison. And we talked about some recommendation for professional development, ELL professional development for guidance counselors and adjustment counselors.
We picked those up in your green folder in the to-do. We'll follow up those on the next one.
Ms. Sheridan?
Could we possibly add a facility subcommittee report at the next meeting, please?
Absolutely.
And if I might, to your point, when we sent the presentation on internal data, we sent the attachment to the school committee members, and if any school committee member has question on that internal data, and I'll work with you when you want the complete presentation.
Great. Entertain a motion to go into executive session, not to return to public session, for the discussion of 3 items, one of which I'm adding. A negotiation strategy for, actually the order in which we're going to take them is collective bargaining strategy for AFSCME, negotiation strategy for non-union contracts, and a request for a hearing before the school committee from a parent.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion, this is a roll call vote. Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Bagley Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Padera?
Yes.
Ms. Sheridan?
Yes.
Mr. Walker, yes.
Folder.